Welcome back to another fan reading on r/Tales of the Creeps. Today we are diving into probably the longest story I am ever going to read at this point in time. It's by a man named Toxic Cargo, and the story is called Buckskin. I have no idea what to expect from this. I'm really hoping it's a Skinwalker story or some kind of Wendigo story, because I love like creature features, cryptid stuff. That's like my go-to horror. I love that stuff. So, I don't know. He's posted a lot of other stuff on r/Creepcast and Tales from the Creeps. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check the author out. All right, without further ado, let's get into the scary story of Buckskin. Hello? Hey, Sean. It's Jim. Jim? Jim Abernathy down at the station? Oh, Jim. Sorry, your voice sounded weird through the receiver. How's it going? Oh, I was hoping to get out early today, but I'm stuck here doing paperwork. Supposed to take my daughter to the movies later. Guess I'm going to be cutting it close on the pickup. What about you? Oh, rummaging around in a dead guy's guts. So the usual. Calling to ask about that jumper? What the wow. What a kick. Yeah, Whiskey said she'd get at me in an autopsy by Friday. Just wanted to check in to see how it was coming. Going through some of the stuff found in the room right now. Hope she might be able to verify a few things. Is she in? Sorry, you just missed her. I'll tell you right away. I'll tell you right now, though. I don't think we're going to have the autopsy done. We got a rush job today from one of your friends in homicide. Said he had to move quick, so he... Oh my gosh. Said he had to move quick, so we had to push you back. Hope that's alright. Oh yeah, no problem. Just found some weird stuff in the apartment. Had to update her on a few things, and I was hoping I could run a few things past her without having to wait on the report. I'll just call back tomorrow, though. Alright, sounds good. Hey, you got another quick question? Sure, what's up? If, hypothetically, I were to find a bunch of weed in the prison pocket of one of the bodies we got here, how much would we have to turn into evidence? Fuck you, Sean. Yeah, fuck you too, old man. Anyway, I'll let you go. Hope you enjoy your night with your girl. Talk to you tomorrow. Thanks. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye. Bye. Found in a spiral-bound notebook at the scene of the crime. As good a day as any to start this. I suppose it's a sunny day. Mild temperature, and that's a rare thing around here, especially in April. This region really is beautiful when it's decided it has a mind of it for it. The lawn here was full of people playing, laying on blankets, talking and eating their meals. I myself could not resist the urge to enjoy the day. I spent much for it sitting with my back to a tree, trying to get the story started. Now the sun is setting, the lawn is largely empty, and I'm sitting at my desk in the apartment. Still trying to get this written. I've been through 3 notebooks so far, over the course of yesterday and today. Maybe this one will be it. A few years ago, when I could still go to the student health center to access mental health resources, a therapist told me that the journaling was quite a useful tool for working through trauma. Said that actually writing things out, as though someone else were going to read them, helped to separate ourselves from our experiences, and understand them from a different perspective that may give clarity. It was one of the only solutions they offered that made any sense to me. I think the idea of documenting what I felt is what appealed to me. I tried it. I really did. I must have filled a shelf of notebooks just trying to get this out. Never finished any of them. They petered out, or didn't get quite right, or were outright lies. I shredded, burned, drowned, and threw away all of them. And for a while I gave up on trying to write about it. But then yesterday happened, and I lost my health card. Now I feel like I need to tell someone about it, even if it's just me reading it later. Before I get to yesterday, though, I need to talk about 10 years ago. The big it that yesterday triggered. I can feel it already. This is going to be a rambling mess. I guess if that's the case, it doesn't really matter how we start. Maybe I'll throw this on one end of the river, instead of just in the trash. Anyway, here goes. The archival libraries at my undergraduate alma mater, like most things in the modern world, really are a marvel when you think about it. I, for one, think we have gotten so surrounded by the little unsung miracles of everyday life that we never really notice them anymore. We wake up in the morning, turn a handle, not just expect, but know drinkable water will come out. We'll let that water fall against our bodies, then turn the handle again and let it drain all through a sewer that would have been the envy of the Romans. Then you grab a processed pastry with jam made from the fruits many of your ancestors never tasted. Hop in a metal machine that propels itself and speeds faster than any horse, and take off down one of the largest, if not the largest, infrastructure projects in human history. To go to a job that you would never in a million years be able to explain in detail. Oh my gosh, I lost my place. Where'd I go? I'm so sorry. That you would never explain in detail to your great-grandfather, let alone anyone further back than that. We call this our morning routine, and consider it so mundane an activity that if asked about it, most people, myself included, don't even remember doing it by noon of that day. Next to that, it is easy enough to see how a multi-history compendium that would rival or even surpass the Library of Alexandria in quantity of information stored may be viewed as little more than a stuffy old corner, hardly worth the time to maintain, let alone visit. I'm sorry, I lost myself there. As you can tell, I feel somewhat passionately about the archives. Frankly, I think passionately about a lot of things most people have forgotten. I think that's why I was drawn to the social science in my younger days. The world is so full of things that once were, and then crumbled under the weight of all that was built upon it, till nothing remained of the stories and legends but a gravel foundation of a parking garage. Full many a flower is born to blush, unseen, and waste its sweetness on the desert air. As the poet once said, I cannot stomach that. The forgetting, I thought to some extent, I still think that if I could hear those stories, if I could just see the remnants, the wake left after, and piece it together, then I could make sure they're never forgotten. That's why I chose to go to college. That's why I chose to study archaeology and cultural anthropology. And that's why many nights, when none of my friends were available and had a little to do, I found myself delving into the stacks, as they were often called. It was in this way that I became aware of many of the peculiarities of the place and the people who moved about within. The library, which contained the archives of the Department of Anthropology and Archaeology, was an ugly, brutalist construction that looked as though it perfectly straddled the line between Romanesque and Soviet apartment block. 7 stories tall, and at the ground level completely ringed by its seamless concrete arcs that rose all the way up past the second set of windows and supported nothing but the concrete slab to keep the rain off this entranceway. I remember that always struck me as a superfluous, considering the clinical efficiency that the rest of the building seemed to be designed with. The immediate interior is, to me, the epitome of what college workspace should look like. Cheap carpet, plastic furniture, matte paint, all bathed in sterile, fluorescent lighting, and a gray-brown green that seemed to be platonic ideal. Seemed to be a platonic ideal of corporate beige. The aesthetic dominated the entirety of the first 4 floors. The archives were located at the 5th, 6th, and 7th floor. The difference was the night and day. The 5th floor was where the rare manuscripts were kept, and felt almost like a laboratory than anything else. The bench lined with stationary magnifying glasses sat on one side of the room, and the rest were occupied large plastic drawers with a large display of some colonial maps occupying the center. This room was fascinating enough, but more magic was held for me in the 6th and 7th floors. You would emerge from the stairs of the elevator to be met with an impenetrable wall of plywood, plastic, and metal shelvings, labeled in order of topic and year of publishing. And I do mean impenetrable. All the shelves rode on steel track and ceiling, and they had a crank mechanism on the side of each shelf, so they could be moved along it like rifling through a filing cabinet on a giant scale. In this way, they could almost double the amount of storage space by putting as many shelves as you could fit on the track, leaving only about 3 feet unused so that the aisle could be made for a human user to actually peruse the selection. The downside of the density, other than the issue, was navigating it, was that it left no room for seating, and it made for a very dark room with the walls of information blocking sight lines to most of the fluorescent lights and often covering all windows. Add this uninviting atmosphere, the anemic state of the graduate program, and the rise of the internet search recipe for a deserted hall of knowledge. Stacks went almost unvisited during the day. Oh my gosh, I lost my place again. I'm sorry. And completely unvisited at night. Even the maintenance crew did not seem to care for it, and the lock on the door to the stairs never seemed to be engaged. And sometimes the dim light would flicker to go out entirely, and not be replaced for months. This place, ignored by seemingly everyone, called to me. Its stacks of dusty and near-forgotten lore beckoned me to the scene, beckoned me to see them, and to revel in the memory they contained. First of the items which set the archives apart from those housed at other universities is their abundance of resources on Native American myths and archaeological sites. This stemmed from 2 factors. That institute was an old and very well regarded university, and the fact that it was located right next to reservation, meaning that by simple proximity were all well suited to be a bridge between the modern and ancient cultures of the first settlers of this land. The collection, of course, mostly pertained to the tribes on the nearby reservation, but they had all manner of material on most of the major groups. Journals and articles describing once new finds, manuscripts decided decades and sometimes centuries old, describing ancient lore and myth that spanned thousands of years, and ranging from the rise and fall of whole nations to deeply personal and philosophical. This was my favorite section to dive into, as the general lack of any native written language left many mysteries to be pondered over in the ruins they left behind in the stories they told orally. Oh, hold on. Oh my gosh, yep, there's the burp. More importantly, for me, they seem to be stories most likely to be forgotten. It made me feel more special for knowing them, as though I were a monk defending a sacred relic. I was selfishly empathetic back then. Sometimes I worry that I still am. Second of the things that set these archives apart was, I suppose, a direct result of the first item. Only rarely when I went into the archives would there be anyone else there, and most of the time they would be some of the standard fare on a college campus, overworked, 20-something post-grads finding sources for their dissertation of the occasional bored-looking freshman, doing an introductory course that required they get familiar with the library and its contents. Every so often, though, you'd get someone odd. Sometimes the oddity was obvious for the sight of them, like the one time I asked the directions to the information of the Lakota from a deathly pale fellow wearing a full native headdress and little else. Weird. Can only hope it was some kind of reenactor with 1/8 native ancestry and not some half-blitz fraternity brother suiting up for his Halloween costume. Other times the oddity was less obvious upon the first glance, like the girl I found sitting on the staircase, fully engrossed in a book about accounts and stories of the Great Spirit. Decided to strike up a conversation with her and asked her about what she was reading. She seemed lovely right up until she got around to explaining why she was reading about the Great Spirit. When she explained to me that her last vision quest had revealed to her the infinitely collapsing fractal form of the God Spirit, and began saying something about enlisting his help in the astral war or some such. Made my excuse and practically ran back downstairs. I didn't go back for 3 months after that one, and that was the last time I tried to talk at length with anyone. I met up there. Sorry, I'm stalling. The point is this. I generally held out rather ambivalent opinions on the strangers I saw and met in the stacks. Some I even came to like, in a far-off observational way. I certainly never felt like I was in any danger from any of them. That is, until the night in question. It was raining, I remember that much. I was supposed to be meeting up with some friends to go on a bar crawl to celebrate the end of the midterms, but a combination of the bad weather, a few people getting sick, and the general flackness of our crowd made the plans fall apart that last minute. Halfway home to my apartment for a quiet night of $1 instant ramen and whatever it was on TV, I could feel the wind trying to take my umbrella from my hands and turn it inside out. I decided to stop in the archives to kill some time while I waited for the storm to slacken off a little bit. I stepped through the main set of the stores and stood in the entryway, ruffling my umbrella to try and get it dry as possible before walking in. Even after this show of trying to get all loose water off, I still felt the disapproving gaze of my willowy librarian at the desk following me as I moved toward the elevator and stairwell. I stepped into the elevator and pressed 6. And I turned and gave the librarian the biggest grin I could muster as she rapidly turned her eyes back to her book before she was hidden by the door sliding closed. Oh, here comes another one. Man. Sorry, that's just normal for this channel. When the doors opened on the 6th floor, I was met with a stranger. Not directly opposite the door, mind you, but as I stepped out, I could just see him in the stacks, standing motionless. I waited patiently, hoping he would find what he needed as soon as he stepped out so I could move in and start my own search. I waited there, shifting feet and eventually leaning against the wall for 15 full minutes. The corner of his coat and his boots under the shelves, the only part of his body I could see from entrance without getting closer. Never moved an inch, eventually understanding that he was taking his sweet time. I stepped forward to see what row he was looking in and saw that it was one of the shelves containing the Native American collection, specifically containing journals and scholarly articles regarding archaeological finds. Heard the rustle of pages, and I realized he must be reading in there, just standing like that. I came to the conclusion that if I wanted to read any of the materials I had come for, would simply have to squeeze around him, building my resolve. I walked briskly towards the shelves and to turn down the row, stopping as I got my first good look at him. First thing I noticed was the dirt on the color purple shirt, orange pants, running coat, color of a trash bag, well-worn beige work boots, and a bright blue sock cap pulled lower on his face. It was a certifiable explosion of bright, gaudy color, all covered in a dirty layer of sweat and oil that spoke of rare showers and rare laundry trips. It looked like he had crawled out of a thrift shop's donation bin, then rolled all the way here in a gutter. He stood mouth agape, shocked into silence by the fashion flashbang, standing no more than a yard in front of me. Then the scent rolled over me. I hadn't smelled anything before, but now that I was 3 feet from him, it was pungent. It was like a roadkill in swamp water with something else that might have been rotting wood rolled in. My eyes were beginning to water. I had to stop and rub them, clear to regain some composure. Only after my hand fell to my side did I look back up and register his face. The closest comparison I could draw to this man's face looked like it was an old, sickly basset hound. His skin hung loosely off his face. Under his beard, his jowls hung like drapes around the closed opening of his mouth. Even in profile, I could see the pink of exposed eye socket, at least a half-inch of it, peeking out beneath the iciest blue eyes I had ever seen. The whites of said eyes themselves were jaundiced and yellow, with bloodshot red veins starting from the edges toward the iris like a lightning bolts. He was looking at the book in his hands with such intensity and focus that it looked as though he would just as soon set the pages ablaze with his glare as read the words contained within. My gaze passed from his eyes to the book, and just the skin on his hands matched the wrinkled sagginess of his face. His skin was unnaturally brown, somewhere between a bad spray of tan and a minstrel show, in a minstrel show. I am dyslexic. I struggle to read sometimes, so please bear with me. Minstrel show. And as I looked at his hands, it occurred to me that the inside of his palms were the same shade as the rest of him, and that they seemed to be fuzzy all over, even the tips of his fingers, as though covered by a translucent mold or by hair that had been cut short. It took me several seconds before I realized I was staring. Quickly averted my eyes, and he did not look up or in any way acknowledge my presence when I turned and kept walking down the outside aisle. I didn't stop walking until I had gotten all the way to the end. The track on the ceiling met the wall, and I was surrounded on 3 sides by walls and shelves. I finally paused to collect my thoughts. It was only then that I started to consider the source of his stranger, and I came to the conclusion that he must be homeless and here to get out of the rain, same as me. As I came to this realization, a wave of guilt overtook me for how I reacted to the sight of him. After all, he couldn't help his position. A couple more years, or I suppose decades, since he obviously looked to be a very old man. A few bad turns of luck. I could be well in his position, wearing my own set of clothes, sitting in an archives, trying to get dry. He wasn't even wearing gloves. That would explain the fuzziness and flat beige color of his hands. Even as I pictured them in my mind, I realized they did indeed look very much like suit or buckskin. They were probably the nicest clothes he owned. As I stood there at the end of the row, kicking myself for a temporary lapse of empathy, just really trying not to look back to see if he was still there. I found myself wondering why exactly he'd been let up here. There was a front desk. Surely they wouldn't. My question was immediately answered by my own knowledge. They didn't even care enough to fix the lock in the stairwell or the flickering lights. Why would they care who comes up here to read? At last, I couldn't bear not to look anymore, and turned my gaze back to the subject from my guilty conscience. The only piece of him that I could see from my vantage point was the edge of his coat and his boots under the shelf. He had not moved from his spot, not even shuffled his feet. The only sign he was still alive was the rustle of a page turning every few seconds after I turned around. I decided that he had either noticed me or immediately dismissed my presence. Or he was so engrossed in the book he was reading in his own world that he wouldn't notice me if I ran up and screamed in his face. When I remembered the intensity with which he was looking at the book, I imagined it to be the latter. After a few minutes of watching his motionless boots and listening to him silently read, I realized that I couldn't just stand there in the corner forever. He wasn't moving anytime soon. Furthermore, I couldn't use the crank to make a new aisle for myself to go down without crushing him between the 2 shelves. Gross. So I was left with two choices. Either I left the archives the way I came, maybe go to a different part of the library, or even brave the rain and just go home to my tiny apartment. Or endure an intensely awkward encounter between myself and the homeless man as I try to squeeze past him to get the deeper parts of the archives. I like to say I was smart enough to just leave, but I was not. I don't think I could explain to you why I decided to stay. In the end, I think the biggest thing was my guilt over how I'd reacted to seeing the old man. I think somewhere inside of me I had to stay. I had to go deeper in the archives. And I had to squeeze past and lightly touch the man I was revolted by, partially as penance for acting the way I had, and partially so I could prove to myself and to him, if he cared at all, that I wasn't all as shallow as the initial reaction. Either way, as I walked back down the outside aisle, I breathed through my mouth to avoid the smell and steel myself for an upcoming encounter. Unsurprisingly, found the man in nearly the same state as earlier. The only notable change in the position or demeanor was the number of pages he had read past. It was moving fairly quick. Not a quarter of the way through the book, it looked like he had only just started when I walked in. He remained fixated on his reading as I approached, looking again at the bloodshot eyes and the hard set of the jaw beneath his loose folds of skin. I wondered if he had even blinked since last I looked at him. Tried to get his attention to no avail. I waited, waved, cleared my throat, said, "Excuse me," even clapped just to see if it would make him jump. The only thing I got for my trouble was the turn of a page. After about 30 seconds, I resigned myself to the inevitable, saying, "Sir?" I reached out to touch his shoulder just as my hand was about to make contact with his coat, though he abruptly shifted with precision and solidity that one might expect from a clockwork automaton. He stepped back and pulled his book closer to his chest, giving me just enough space to pass through. I recoiled slightly and hesitated, only for a second. Has he been aware of me this entire time? What the hell? My sheer discomfort of the situation did not allow me to stay there for very long. With a mumbled thanks, I compelled myself forward as I squeezed past him. As my chest pressed up against his book, I felt something odd. As though someone had made a water balloon with a stone in the middle. It was now squished between us. Only it took a split second for me to realize that I must be his hand. I nearly gagged. When I finally got out, I didn't even look back, just suppressed a shudder, muttered, "Sorry," and walked away briskly down the rest of the aisle. As soon as I had passed, I heard his boots step forward again, and I imagined the same precise movement I had seen before happening in reverse, as though he were not a man but a stone door slamming shut behind me. Walking slowed as I got to the end of the row, and I allowed myself a quick peek behind me. It was as though I had never walked through. He was standing in the exact same spot as before, holding the book as the exact same way, and if I had a cent to wager, I would have bet that the look on his face was still that of a man trying to set paper on fire with his eyes. In this moment, my guilt abated and my repulsion obeyed due to the distance between us. I felt budding, morbid curiosity. My mind raced with questions I dare not approach to ask him. Who was he? Why was he here? What on earth was he reading that had so enraptured him? I found myself as intrigued with him as I was any other items on the shelves. At that moment, I made a decision. I grabbed a random book, sat at the end of the row, facing the man, opened it to a random page, and began switching between observing this odd fellow and reading snippets from the book I had chosen. In all the rush, I had failed to notice what row I had been walking down. Looking at the academic journal I had grabbed, it appeared to be the row containing materials on the natives of the Great Lake regions. In particular, I seemed to grab some student's self-published article concerning an archaeological site near Lake Erie. Rolled my eyes at this. If it wasn't good enough for a wider publication, then it was very well be little better than schizophrenic ramblings. However, as I drove to the abstract, I found myself getting pulled in. Despite my misgivings, after all, I figured, if this was so narrowly published and little read, then odds are I'm the first person to read this in years. Quite possibly decades. Enticed by the thought, I read on. The site was in upstate New York in what was formerly territory belonging to the Seneca tribe in the I'm gonna butcher this. In the tribe of the Haudenosaunee, better known as the Iroquois Confederacy. That my dyslexia is destroying me. It appeared to have at one point been the site of a native settlement with several human remains. There were once long houses underneath a burned layer, carbon dated to 1546 before significant European settlement of the region. They believed that it was the target of some kind of raid with the aim of annihilation. The sheer quantity of human remains within the village center, the lack of seemingly any attempt to perform rites for the dead, no evidence of native settlement after the burn layer point towards a genocidal attack. It was unexpected, brutal, and was over nearly as quickly as it started. No evidence was found to indicate what, if anything, might have incurred such an attack. The authors could only speculate that it was part of some tribal politics, perhaps a grudge that had festered until it grew too large, or retribution for some unknowable crime. Perhaps it was nothing more than some forgotten war between confederacies. With no more bad blood than the picking of the wrong alliances, with no written record of the dead unwilling to talk, it was simply impossible to say. Just then, I heard a sound from down the aisle. I glanced up quickly and looked at the man at the end. As I scanned his form, it took me a while to find that he had changed. Though he had assumed the same stance and demeanor as before, somewhere to a frightening degree, I finally saw that he had switched books. He was now glaring at a tome that, from which was I sitting, looked very old, a worn fabric, hardback that was probably some other color at some point, but had muted to drab near black as its pages faded yellow. I admitted I was a little bit shocked. Despite the clear show of consciousness I had received just a minute before, for some reason, I had no conscience. I had not considered that he would change books. I figured his intense glare had meant some fascination with what he was reading, but if not, he was looking for something. If so, what? The question sat quietly in my mind. The pattering of the rain on the windows was the only answer. Only then did another set of thoughts occur to me. The noise I had heard was a book being put back on the shelf. I looked up immediately upon hearing it. When I saw him, he was already in his original position. How quickly would he have had to move to make that possible? I felt a knot of tension begin to form in my stomach, and I quickly tried to dispel it. I must not have heard him right. Maybe I had moved very quietly and only made sound that lasted a second as he settled back into his stance. Maybe I had moved a bit quickly for an old man, but I had to take longer to look up from my reading than I thought. Maybe I should mind my own damn business and leave him be. I wrenched my attention from him and back to my article, and forced myself to keep reading until my nerves had calmed. The village appeared to have been palisaded in the fashion common to the more permanent Haudenosaunee settlements, with logs posted upright, one next to the other in a circle around the town center before spiraling out of natural choke point that any intruder would have to go through to enter. The lack of many human remains near the gate, despite the great deal of them in the center of the town, seemed to imply that whatever attack had been following them had taken them quite unawares. The author also made brief note of some of the more standard findings at the site, such as this: fused pits that gave hints to the general diet of the inhabitants, the standard of 3 sisters, crops, as well as good helpings of the game, meat and fish, various stone pieces and arrowheads scattered about, some smaller items of luxury in a few of the longhouses, beads and other small sundries, mostly. Overall, with what little they found in the village, they seemed overwhelmingly common. I was a little surprised, actually. Not surprised that so little was found, but that I found so little material significance. Would be given a full article. I tried to imagine the village as I read what it must have been like, but the authors did not spend any time at all on detail for the section. I felt like they were more or less skimming all over this, hurrying along in order to get their real focus. Finally, as I reached the end of the introduction section, it was revealed that they had written this all down, the burial site nearby. The Haudenosaunee, as most people around the world, are known as practical myriad of death rituals, with some variation across clans and tribes due to both small cultures, differences in geographical practicalities. Is this a horror story or a history lecture? A lecture. I don't mean to be rude, but is this all important? It's just a lot. That's all I'm saying. It's very wordy. All right, where was I? Where was I? I lost my place. They're about small culture difference in geographical practicalities. These practices result in a number of tangible items that can be found later in the gravesite. If memorial posts are placed, then a hole for the post can be found. If they practice communal burial, then those bodies will be found jumbled together. Or in the case of the ruins of this little Seneca village, if a body is buried within finery, weapons and tools that in life, with sometimes those items getting preserved and later dug up. Where the village saw a dearth of artifacts, the burial places was awash with them. The site was located in a floodplain, so the conditions were ideal for organic preservation. More clubs, medicine sticks, and nearly full intact pair of buckskin moccasins, countless scraps and pieces of the other claws. That's not even getting into the bodies themselves. Femurs, ribs, broken and healed collarbones, spines broken in one image, long forgotten wars, logging accidents, or any a number of small tragedies never to be heard again. Whose existence is undeniable as the calcium they've written in, waiting to be read and pondered. In total, they found, according to them, 72 notable artifacts that, by all rights, would send earthquakes through the field. The author's excitement bled through the page, touching me even through the layers of academic writing and staining my hands red with their passion. But the findings in the burial site had what I had come for. The article was relatively new then, so the documentation included a vast array of pictures and exhibits for my consideration. I dwelt on every map, every image, every word. Flipped back to the introduction and read it again. The authors must have been some of the least imaginative academics I'd ever encountered. How could they present the village in such a passive way, as though the bodies had always been corpses and never walked among those long houses? Poring over the pictures of the findings, I did the work the authors had not. I imagined the people in the graves, refleshed and walking, and their long houses rebuilt. I felt like, in some distant sense, I could see them. I can see and hear them, like I had left the archives right then and there and step out into the village in the middle of the forest. A world of dappled leaves and tight community, not so different from the place I grew up. In this town, children laughed, people loved and mourned, lived and died. And then, in all of it, all the life, all the people, it was simply wiped away, like so much chalk on a blackboard. Another casualty of the homogenizing force of the 18th and 19th century, observable and beautiful only to the people who lived it. I spent a good long time sitting in the archive, sitting in the village, and then, towards the end of the findings, almost a footnote there, was one final discovery that considered to be the strangest of all, a grave that seemed as though it didn't belong. Something was wrong. Pulled me out of the village and out of the page, and blinked and confused, brought me back to reality as though I was waking from a dream. It took me a second to put my finger on what had perturbed me. I'd been sitting there in the fluorescent glow with only the sound of the strange drone down the aisle turning its pages to accompany me. I looked up in a while, and I had realized that the sound of the turning pages had stopped. Cautiously lifted my eyes from the journal and looked toward the stranger. He, of course, had not moved from his spot. That is not to say he was not a change. Whereas before he had been flipping through pages almost inhumanly, quickly, and otherwise standing still as a dead oak. Oh, shoot, I lost my place again. He had stopped his reading on what looked about halfway through the dark, worn tome. Furthermore, for the first time squeezing past him, I saw movement. His shoulders were rising and falling steadily and rhythmically, so a breeze were blowing through him and filling his chest more than it was breathing. I tried to look past his grotesque features and get a read on him. Under his melting basset hound face and garish, dirty clothes, I could see his jaw clenching, the muscles on his neck straining. He was still looking with the same intensity as before, but now there was something else. Looking closer, I could see his gloved hands faintly trembling, and I swear I saw something drip from his eyes onto the page. Sadness? What on earth could have been found in that book that inspired this response in such an otherwise robotic man? I nearly set my journal down and nearly began walking up to the aisle. Had begun trying to build up my courage to speak to him, to ask him what he was looking at, but never quite made it off the ground. One thought bubbled up. I'd never seen anyone grind their teeth in sadness. There was anger in that stare, in the sickly face and that imposing build. It was enough to stop any thoughts of speaking to him dead in their tracks. Whatever he's dealing with, I figured, might be the best that he experienced it in his way, but without my interference. I left him his privacy and again forced my attention back to my article. Alright, that was part 1A of Buckskin. This is a 5-part series, and we got a lot through. I'm just going to say right now, it's not a bad start. I get what the author but it's extremely wordy, and it delves so deep into the history of these books and archives he's going through. Like, I appreciate it, but just a little advice. I just wish he would break up his like long and large paragraphs. It makes it really hard to read, especially for a dyslexic person like me. But I am doing the best I can. I'm trying not to butcher his story because I want to get this out there and appreciate it, the author, for what he has written. So, all right, enough of that. Let's get into part 1B, and then after that we'll do. There's a lot to read. It's a lot to read. The first thing immediately notable about the tomb was the marking, rather the lack thereof. At every other grave, there was the signs of a ceremonial post, or at least some kind of visible delineation. There was only one that did not have those, meaning that, for whatever reason, someone did not want this grave to be found. The second thing notable was the burial place. The burial place was the location. While all the other tribe members had been laid to rest in their cemetery of sorts, the individual had been set apart. Even more confusing, while the larger burial site was overrun with creeping vines, little bushes, and relatively young trees. Oh, excuse me, another burp. The only grave was found in the middle of the small, dead clearing, where little grew but grass and lichen. In fact, soil tests done at the site indicated abnormally low soil pH in the clearing. Normally oh my gosh, why can I not say this? Normally indicative of the industrial waste, despite the owner of the property claiming that nothing of the sort had been ever dumped there. The oddities only continued once excavation began. Just 6 inches below the surface, they found some fired clay. They began digging and brushing away dirt, and the piece of the pottery got larger and larger until the team realized the size of what they were looking at. A 5-foot diameter circular pottery bowl, resembling something like an ancient in-ground bathtub, with walls thin enough so that they could stop using pickaxes to preserve it. No one had ever seen anything like it. They theorized that it had been made by digging a hole, laying the sides with clay, and then keeping a fire burning it until it was waterproof. At that point, they could only guess at its original purpose. The author seemed to think it was for some kind of an industry, maybe for mass cooking. It was only when they found the body that they were disillusioned from the train of thought. Sitting there at the bottom of the bowl was the dissected corpse of a woman. She lay in no particular position, as though she had simply been thrown in. Somehow, nobody seemed to know exactly how, the skin on her body had been preserved, and it was stretched taut like a black leather over her bones. Though her eyes and muscle tissue had long shriveled away, the position they found her in seemed contorted. With mouth agape as though she had been buried mid-scream, nothing else was found in the grave, though according to the authors, there was one final thing notable about her. Upon removing the body, it was remarked by the field staff that some of the bones appeared to have been broken. This is not uncommon in old bodies, dug up from the makeshift crypts, and the teams were mostly focused on the rarity of a true well-preserved mummified corpse. It wasn't until they got back to the autopsy room that the oddity was noticed. Every bone in her body was broken. All of them. Hands, feet, arms, legs, ribs, vertebrae, pelvis, collarbones. Even the hard-to-reach parts of the skull. Every last one snapped, shattered, or crushed. Whatever caused this must have been the cause of death, but nobody seemed to be able to put to words what might have done this. Besides maybe some horrific form of torture or punitive murder, since the Irokes were not known to practice ritual human sacrifice. As I came to the end of the paragraph, the final line of the page hooked me further. Oral tradition had known Iroquois practice at the time support the murder of being some form of revenge killing. In fact, the side of the body arranged line up well with some old folk tales brought over from the so-called old world as found in. My eyes moved to the next page, eager to read on. But the next page seemed to begin a whole different section, something about the village's effect on the field of North American anthropology. I rolled in a little in confusion and flipped back to the fourth. I am so sorry about the dogs. I hate when my neighbors let them out. Okay, I think my neighbor's dog stopped barking. My eyes moved to the next page, eager to read on, but the next page seemed to begin a whole different section, something about the village's effect on the field of North American anthropology. I rolled a little in confusion and flipped back and forth, pitching and rubbing the pages to make sure I wasn't missing anything. But nothing arose. It took a good 30 seconds before I noticed a slight roughness along the spine between their incongruous pages. I ran my finger down it and winced as I got a paper cut. A single drop of blood hit the page before I started sucking on the cut. A missing page? Why? And here of all places? Who in God's name would... My question was immediately answered by the sudden sound of a tearing paper. Ripped from my reverie, my eyes darted upward, and there, at the end of the aisle, I saw him, a stranger in his loud clothing and shouting stench. Was no longer silent nor still. He was crouched in a squat, book open beneath his muddied boots. Sandbur, a flurry of rendering and shredding, mangled the pages before bringing them up to his mouth. I could see him in profile, and I could see that his mouth was barely closing to swallow between bites. One of my classes studying early man, we were made to watch a documentary on chimp war, less a war and more of a lynching. Once the apes had killed the male they wanted dead, the video graphically showed the way they tore into his body, dividing the ligament from bone and skin from muscle with their teeth and powerful arms. What I saw the man doing there when archives reminded me of that. It felt nearly as though I was watching some ancient Neanderthal given to hunger and eat his tribesmen, before writing or tools or digging or talking, or right long forgotten, and willingly so. I nearly gagged yet again, though I did not know if it was more from the smell or the image in my head. Instead, I found myself saying shaky, "Hey!" standing up and staring towards him. I don't know what I was thinking. I certainly don't know what I was expecting to happen. I could have waited for him to leave and told someone that he'd done after. I could have pretended not to hear anything at all, and frankly, done any number of things that could... Oh my gosh. Any number of things other than get into a confrontation with a clearly deranged homeless man. But none of those things would ever save the book. That held enough weight for me to move my legs and get ready to tackle him? Pull him off? Pull the book away? I really wasn't sure. That it would wound up mattering. As expected, I didn't deviate from the course at all as I closed the distance to 20 feet, or when I yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" at 15 feet. As soon as I got up next to him, though, his head snapped around, lowered my body, and went to shoulder him off the book while I picked it up. Before I knew it, the book was in my hands, and we were both on the floor. I've not been in many fights. Before that day, the last one I had been in was when I was 12. I've not been out in one since, but I know what a fist feels like, and I'm telling you that as I clutched the book and tried to get into my feet, the hand that came from the left of me and made me contact with my temple didn't feel like a fist. It felt squished and moved before impacting with something under it. It felt as concrete and sharp as flint. It felt like I had been hit with a fist. And more like a sock full of gravel and lotion. I thought the stranger had brought a weapon, but after a hit had dropped me. After the hit had dropped me, after he flipped me over into my back and kept pounding me, even after I dropped the book and tried to raise my hands to protect myself, I realized that he wasn't using anything but his hands. The feeling wasn't my imagination. Every hit he landed made a sickening crunching sound. Even in the shots to my gut that came hard and quick, I vomited on the floor. Eventually, my hands and arms started moving slower, and I stopped reacting at all. But the blows kept falling. They started to come in a fast rhythm and dreadful beat that tattooed itself into my ribs and throat and head. Good Lord. This dude he's beating him like a chimp. That's what I have in my head right now. He's just like wailing on him like a chimpanzee. When I was young, I was a forgetful child. Leave refrigerators open, doors unlocked, dogs ungated. One time I forgot to look before crossing the road on my bike, and only just barely managed to brake before getting eviscerated by a pickup going 90 down a country lane. My father saw it and rushed out to pick me up. After he checked to make sure I was okay, he took a deep breath and for the first time in my life, wound up and smacked me across the face, catching me before I could go down again. After while I stood looking at him with shock, he said, "How many times I told you to look both ways?" I eventually stammered out, "I'm sorry, I forgot." "Forgot? What do you mean, forgot, boy? I told you that road is dangerous," he yelled. "And now you tell me nearly you lost you because you forgot?" He stopped, took another breath, then he said in a much quieter voice, "Son, I love you with all my heart. You are my pride and my joy. But if I ever See you doing something like shit brain fucking stupid again, I'll beat you like a Cherokee drum. Never forgot again, and like I said, it never hit me after that, but that threat stuck with me. I will beat you like a Cherokee drum. At each blow, it began to feel more like a dull thud, and the sharp pain of what I later learned was broken bone was numbed by my new pain. Some distant part of my mind remembered that. I realized that that's what happened to me. The stranger was beating me like a drum. As the blood from my forehead and temples made me instinctively close my eyes, I could feel the tempo, an erratic, fast-paced cadence aligned with an unheard, no less felt aortic pulse. As each fist hit me like a raw hide stretched with over wood. I swore for a second. I felt vibrations of the pain. I felt the earth vibrating at the same frequency until the next hit came. Finally, my consciousness started to wane. I remember only flashes, the scars that seemed to cover every inch of his skin, his wrist revealed by the movement of his sleeve, showing no end of glove, only pseudo-like tan skin as his blows finished and blood flowed out of my nose and my mouth and gashed above my left eye. My right eye finally settled in on his. I deliberately not tried to look at them for very long in my previous examination, but on my gaze met his, and I could not turn away. There was nothing behind them. It was as though he didn't even see me. His face couldn't even have been more than 6 inches from mine. Even though my broken nose, the smell of decay was stronger than ever now, and seemed to emanate from his mouth and with each breath. I noticed something then for the first time. His eyes were completely dry, so they were glass marbles, but the veins were real. As the detached look at his hands ran through my hair, picked my head up off the floor and slammed it back down. Then the next flash, as he dragged me for a few feet, when I opened my eyes again, I saw he had put my leg underneath one of the shelves. I watched as he stood up. He grabbed the shelf with both hands. There was a great creaking and a snap that seemed to me like a gunshot as he broke over the overhead rail. The shelf ran on. For in one strong motion, he raised it and brought the full weight of 100 years of archived knowledge down on my shin. With that, he took the book I had tried desperately to save in one hand, and with the other hand, he grabbed my hair again and slammed my head back against the tile once more. This time it was enough. I saw stars, and then remembered nothing more. There wasn't much to tell about after that. Eventually I came to, tried to open my eyes, but what little light my swollen eyelids could let in hurt so much I'd rather keep them shut. My head felt like it had been stuck in the library, Liberty Bell at the moment of its cracking. My body fared worse. I tried to yell, to scream, but my crushed windpipe of the sharp pain of my broken ribs did not allow for more than a squeak. Last I tried to crawl away, but the weight of the shelf kept me pinned as the pain in my leg nearly caused me to fall unconscious again. So I lay there, croaking like a frog on a freeway, waiting for what I assumed to be the hour of either my salvation or death. Luckily, I didn't have to wait very long. In the end, it was the spindly librarian that saved me. I learned later that she was below on the 4th floor when she had heard the sound of me being slammed with the shelf, thinking it was just some trick of the vents, but wanting to check it out anyway. She finished her task and took the elevator up. She saw me as soon as the door opened and immediately screamed in the way I couldn't muster at the time. From there, it was a multi-day blur of hospital rooms, doctors, friends, family, and of course, police. I told them everything I knew, about the stranger, about his demeanor and his madness, about the book and the beatings. Nothing ever came of it. Seems the description of gaudy, smelly, schizophrenic homeless man with violent tendencies simply does not narrow it down enough to get a clear suspect. For the next 9 months while my legs healed, they called me in for countless lineups, but none of them ever had been stranger. Eventually they stopped calling. The final butcher's bill was a broken leg, 6 broken ribs, a major concussion, a bruised windpipe, a burst appendix, 20 stitches, 13 staples, and 100 other things I've forgotten by now. The doctors and surgeons said my injuries were more consistent with being beaten with a brick than a simple fist fight. The cops kept asking if I remember what he hit me with. No matter how many times I told them, he just kept punching me. If I recall the police report correctly, they labeled it an unidentified weapon. I wanted to believe them. I certainly felt like I'd been beaten with a brick, if not worse. But no matter how much I wanted to believe them, some part of me never forgot what I saw, what I felt. He had no weapon. He didn't even have gloves. Just 2 hands with skin too much like velvet. The the crunch with the sound of breaking bones and cut like gravel on each impact. That and those horrid eyes, if you could even call them that. Glassy and blue as glacier ice that looked at me, but never seemed to see anything. Never seemed to see me, as though to him he may have well been beating me the tiles beneath me. Slowly, I got better, though never back to what I was. My body healed, the case went cold, and I did my best to forget about the stranger, to pass it off as a brutal, maybe even tragic freak occurrence. But I couldn't forget. I can't forget. Even all these years later, my nose still sits at a crooked angle to my face. Struggle now to even remember faces and dates and names. And on rainy days, I can feel the place of my leg where the bolts hold the bone together. And most notably to me, I still see him in my dreams. Sometimes I'm back in the midst of the beating, but the world a blur of scar tissue and pain. Sometimes I'm sitting, watching him tear into a carcass the way he tore into that book. Sometimes I'm just sitting in my room, and someone know he's in there looking through me. But I can't see him. It's been well over a decade now. Now here I am, a 32-year-old PhD student with 4 deadbolts on his apartment front door who can't go to sleep until each lock has been checked 3 times. Who can't shower unless he can see through the curtains, just in case ghosts decide to come back for him. I'm sorry I get frustrated with myself. I know it's a little ridiculous, being this paranoid, but still, here I am. Even with that, I feel like I had my condition under control. Until yesterday, something happened that made me remember and drove me to my writing this notebook. Now it is late. I've been waiting for hours now. Night has fallen and my hand is cramped. Besides, I need to get through my thoughts in order. I don't know what comes next to be another rambling mess like this one. I'll sleep on it and write more tomorrow. For now, goodbye. That was great, actually. I love the description of the homeless dude just tearing into the book. And then when the narrator comes, he just starts beating him senseless like a dang chimp. That's just all I saw in my head. I know I'm repeating myself, but all I see is this chimp in homeless clothing, just beating the snot out of somebody. I like what it's going for. I have no idea what to expect of part 2. So I'm excited to get into that, so let's go ahead and get into it. Hey, Whiskey, I was just about to call you. What's going on?
Hey, Jay. Oh, not too much. Sean mentioned you called the office phone last night. Sorry for ducking out early on you. I'd appreciate you not calling my cell, though. I had a lot on my mind.
Really? Damn, that sucks to hear, man. Was it Rick again?
No, he's alright. We've been good for a while now. The couples therapist you recommended really did wonders, though I guess it could all have been avoided if I just bit the bullet and went in sooner. No, it was... Well, did I ever have a moment where you suddenly remember something that you haven't been thought about in years, unprompted? Like a mistake that shaped you, who you are, but you haven't thought about it in a while, and then one day it hits you out of the blue just to remember it, and you get hit with all that regret you should have been feeling about all at once? Sorry, that was really TMI. Point is, I left early to clear my head. I'll be working later tonight to compensate.
No, it's fine. I just wasn't expecting it, but I mean, I'm here for you, man. You alright? Do you want to talk about it?
No, I'm fine. Did Sean mention the rush job we got that pushed your jumper request back?
Yeah, he said it was one of the guys that homicided something he needed right away.
Yeah, it was some dope boy or something. He had a 9mm entry wound under his head, and a friend saying he shot himself while they were both testing the supply. They wanted an autopsy to verify the story, and they thought the friend at risk of running, and it's not that important. You can probably get the details from them. The point is, it was after that. I was washing my hands in the basin, getting ready to get back to work on your jumper. So I was washing, and suddenly, like a bullet from the blue, did I ever tell you about the medical residency?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'll tell you a bit about it.
This is a lot. Oh, that's a lot to read. Okay, here we go. Alright, I gotta lock in.
Okay, I'll tell you all about it. So this was a little after Desert Storm. I'd used my GI bill to get through medical school, and I was picking where I wanted to be resident at. And it didn't really matter too much to me, so I kind of just did what my counselor said. She sent me over to Wisconsin in Indianapolis. It's a hospital near the downtown there. And they do health care for a lot of the poorer parts of the city. Anyway, they had me in ER duty for the first rotation again. My counselor's recommendation. I think she thought the military experience would help me deal with a stressful situation or something. It was my first night there, and the ambulance comes in with some black kid who got shot. Said they thought it was some gang shit afterwards. I don't know. I didn't really follow up. But in the moment, they just said he had 6 entry wounds and no exit wounds, meaning we'd have to go fishing. He was sedated when he got in, and over the next hour or so we were able to get all the bullets out of him and get him relatively stable. The doctor and I was falling around and had other patients to get to, so he left to handle them. It was just me in the room doing some of that close out stuff for the procedure. Suddenly, I look over and the sheets are all red, and his kid's leaking like a bad faucet. So I panic. I run over and start trying to apply pressure and yelling for the doctor and looking for gauze, but I've already had my hands on this kid's side, so I can't go out trying to look for in the drawers. It's my first night there, so I don't even know what drawer to look in, and I'm screaming, but the doctor hasn't come in and around the corner yet. So I'm trying to pull out the sheets that the kid's laying on and press them into his side, to make a makeshift bandage or something. Then suddenly I hear this long beep. It's the kid flatlining. Now the doctor's here and he pushes me away and starts doing chest compressions. I'm not sure what to do. I'm just standing there covered in some kid's blood. I'm not just thinking, where's this kid's parents? Does he not have any? Then the doctor stops chest compressions and then that's it. The kid's dead. They pronounce it. And when we wheel him out, I go back to the scrub room to get the bloody scrubs off me. As I'm changing and washing my hands, all I can think about is how I got all the way through a goddamn war zone. Never saw anyone get so much out as a scratch. And then the minute is my responsibility to keep someone else alive, they die on me. Just like that. Whitney, it's whiskey, asshole. Let me finish. Anyway, that's a pretty formative experience in my medical career. It's what made me, oh my gosh, this is another long line. It's not as long as the last. Okay. Time to walk in again. It's whiskey, asshole. Let me finish. Anyway, that's a pretty formative experience in my medical career. It's what made me want to become a pathologist, actually. No live bodies to fuck up and kill an accident. So that's all in the past. Flash forward 25 years. I'm washing my hands in the basin of our operating room. Sean has gone to get all the dope boy samples sent off the lab. And suddenly the memory hits me like a sack of bricks. And I remember that. I realize that. I don't even remember the kid's face. Nothing. I mean, first person I ever saw die, you'd think that one kid kind of shit remember, right? But all I can muster is that kid was black. So I'm standing there, the water's still running, scurrying my brain trying to remember that the kid looked like. No combination of features seemed right. Next thing I know, I'm crying in the sink. I don't know why. The kid's been dead for 25 years. Jay, I knew him for 2 hours. Not only is it perfectly reasonable that I don't remember what he looked like, it's probably better that I don't. I mean, being able to distantly remember your tragic moments should be a good thing, right? But I'm sitting there, crying like a little bitch, mascara running down my face, all over, not remembering the black kid's face. So I get up, wipe my face off, and I clock out early. And I go and I just sit in the park for a few hours. Just trying to get my mind straight before I go home to Rick. Because I know if I go home like this, he's going to ask what's wrong. And I'm going to say nothing. But he knows nothing. It's nothing. And it's going to get me to be another fight because what I'm supposed to tell him. I know not much. I just break down at work because I can't emotionally bear the fact that I may be getting it only over trauma. No, I'm not doing that. So I sit in the park and I watch the ducks and I think about how small their brains are and how lucky the thing is of that. Not only do I forget everything, but they forget they were ever supposed to remember. I sat there like that for a long time. Still there, Jay?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry. It's just a lot to process.
You're telling me, sorry, I didn't mean to go off like that.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
I'm doing better today, though, so thanks for asking. Sean said you had some things you wanted to ask about the jumper of yours.
Yeah, just let me see. I've got it here somewhere. Here. You read the file we sent over, right?
You mean, did I literally the first thing I am procedurally required to do when performing autopsy? Yes, Jay, I did that.
Hey, I was just asking. Anyway, we've got something new we need to add to it. And I wanted to coordinate with you. They found something in the apartment a few days ago. A notebook apparently hid it. He hid it at the ceiling, so we missed it on the first pass.
Within the stateroom he was in? I'm just not shocked. I mean, with the furniture, the holes in the drywall, all that other shit. I mean, from the pictures, it must have been looked like super slime in there.
Easy. We don't know that there was a struggle yet. All we know is that there was some reason the guy took the fast way down from his apartment. For all we know, he might have had some kind of psychotic break.
Sure, he jumped. JFK shot himself, and I'm Mickey Mouse.
Aren't you supposed to be unbiased when you do autopsy?
I'm supposed to go through the procedure and give you the facts. My opinions are my own. So what's so special about this notebook?
Well, when you're not going to like it,
You're... Oh my gosh, I flubbed that. Well, you're not gonna like it. Probably supports the theory of a psychotic break. Talks a bit about his previous mental health struggles first. Details of traumatic encounters with a homeless man some years ago, and then... Oh... The narrator from the past two parts committed suicide. Why, though? That's really interesting. So what? You're telling me this guy, a decently successful and well-adjusted PhD student with a loving family and a bunch of friends, none of whom noticed any change in behavior, by the way, one night decides to trash his own apartment and kill himself because Dirty Daryl beat him up 10 years ago? Jesus, Whiskey. What? Is that not what you were saying? I'm just saying it's more of a possibility that you're giving it credit for. Would you just read the damn thing before passing judgment? I emailed the scan and the evidence right up over to you yesterday. Yeah, I'll give it a read. Can't promise I'll agree with your assessment, though I read those interviews with the friends that we were in the file. Planning a bar crawl for tomorrow night does not strike me as the self-chosen final act of a suicidal man. It was a birthday celebration. They were planning it as a group. You might have had a little say in it. I'm just saying, see what you think. Speaking of the victim's mental state, were you able to get talk screen back? Nah, not yet. Should have it today, though. Not expecting to find anything. No prescriptions on file, no open alcohol containers or paraphernalia found at the scene, no physical signs of long-term drug abuse. I'll still send you the results, but if I had to wager, I'd say this guy was probably stone cold sober whenever it happened. Yeah, that's what I figured too. Oh well, always worth looking into the case like this. Last question, then I'll let you go. Were you able to determine the cause of death? You mean, can I tell if he died before the fall? No, I can't. Breaks in the legs and arms could be given by the assailant. But also, could you have been from hitting one of the lower balcony rails on the way down? No other notable injuries to the body that can explain by a fall. And the head was way obviously completely destroyed by the impact. So if there was any kind of wound there, we'll never know. As far as I can tell, either the fall killed him, or it muddied the waters enough to not immediately know. Shoot. All right. Well, thanks for trying. Hold your horses, Jay. I wasn't finished. I've still got a few more things to look into. I found some odd markings on some of the skull fragments. Could be something left over from the previous medical experiences. They'll still need to reconstruct the skull to confirm. And there's one thing. His brain and his eyes are missing. His brain and his... Shoot, of course they're missing. Whiskey! He hit the pavement head first. His brain was painting the sidewalk, and his eyes probably rolled into the sewer grate. I know that, Jay. I looked at 100 of these things in my time. And if it was just some missing eyes or missing brain tissue, it wouldn't be a fucking eye. But I don't think you're understanding what I've just said. I mean, I can't find any of his brains. I mean, nothing. No shred, no gray globs on the clothes, not a speck of nervous tissue sticking on the inside of his skull piece. Nothing. Like someone pulled it out and ran off with it. I see. And you don't think it's possible that a fall could have done this? It could have turned his brain into a flat mess on all his own. Every speck got cleaned off the street or licked up by stray dogs. It's possible, but unlikely. Yeah. Understood. I want more information before I tell the chief we're looking for some sicko with a brain in a jar. Though I have faith in you, but we need more than a maybe. Keep looking into it. Keep me updated. Call me if you get something. And read the damn notebook. I will. Let me know if anything else gets discovered that I should take into account. I will. Good luck. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye. Bye. My voice is sore, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to finish the story if it kills me. But that's interesting. Our author from part 1A and B committed suicide because he was scared of this homeless person. And then when they found his body, they didn't notice that his brain was gone, so he went to the autopsy. And like Whiskey was like, hey, there's no brain or eyeballs. Somebody either took it or there's nothing left of it. Which I think is really interesting. I'm excited to see what part 3 has in store, so let's get into it. Found in a spiral notebook at the scene of the crime. Hello, it's me again. I've slept, but I haven't rested. I had a nightmare again last night. It's the worst one that I've had has had graced my sleep in years. I turned the overhead fan on to create some white noise and was laying in my bed, tossing and turning, trying to sleep, trying to get that stranger out of my mind long enough to allow my tiredness to overcome me. When suddenly a light came on. I froze mid-shift and tried to be as still as possible. The light was not a familiar warm glow of a ceiling light above my bed, nor was it the harsher, more directed brightness of my bedside lamp. Rather, the light hitting my closed-up lids was a bright, radioactive blue that seemed directional. It got brighter as I turned my head towards it. There, in the center of the room, sat the stranger. He was naked, except for a simple piece of cloth over his lap, and sat with his back perfectly erect and his hands on his knees. His skin sagged off his skeleton like it did off his face, like he was a wax figure captured melting in the heart of a July day. Then froze with their mid-liquidation. The gravity pulled his skin in such a way that I could see the ribs and collarbones prominently. And his hide was the same dark brown tan color all over. Every inch of him had the same fuzzy upholstery texture. I found so off-putting, and the dream was so vivid I could even smell him again. All that was taken in a second before the eyes transfixed me. He only had one eye open. It was the source of the light that had gotten me up. Ooh, that's creepy. The light beamed out of his skull, bathed the room between myself and him in a toxic, icy glow, and left nothing but the enveloping darkness of my once closed, now open doorway behind him. He was, of course, not moving. I sat up quickly in a panic and pressed myself against the headboard. The stranger did not move. I had only once before seen such a hateful gaze. It was from the same wretched creature. It spoke of destruction, of obliteration, fire and bleach and acid and salt to kill the soil I grew from. But the stranger did not move. I sat still, paralyzed, and looked back at him. Recalling it now, I'm reminded distinctly of the deer watching as the incoming headlights made him one with the pavement. Still, the stranger did not move. Eventually, I decided that I had to move, to run, to get out of the sight, to do something. I eventually settled on shifting along the wall until I got to the edge of the bed, when I could hopefully put the mattress between myself and him. As I shuffled back along the wall, keeping my eyes on him, the light followed me, and the stranger did not move. Finally, I reached the edge of the bed, brought my feet to the ground, and moved silently, keeping the bed between him and I like a shield. His head did not turn, yet even as I patted quietly around until I was perpendicular to his face, the light of his gaze followed me. The only way out was to keep my back to the wall and circumnavigate the room around him till I reached the door. It required me moving from behind my bed and getting within 3 feet of him as I went behind him. I did not want to do it. The part of my brain that was somewhat aware of I was dreaming rebelled against it. Yet in the manner of dreams, I was compelled to go forward with it. After only a second of hesitation, my feet began to move again. As I crept around the room, the knot of tension in my stomach continued to grow until it was overwhelming and all-consuming in a way that only dreams can create. I felt like I was collapsing in on myself. Even though his head never moved, the radiant beams from his eyes continued to follow me, like a fugitive in a spotlight. Even when I directly behind his head, looking at his mangled and scarred scalp, I could feel his eye on me, and my shadow still fell long over the carpet. Eventually, I made it around to the entryway of my room, and I was faced with the choice of turning back on him and running through the black doorway, or keeping my eye on him and backing into whatever waited in the darkness beyond. I stopped, unable to choose between the horror before me and the emptiness behind. When suddenly, in the blink of an eye, there was motion. With a great cracking sound, his head spun on his shoulders, 180 degrees, and his eye was fully fixed on me again. As he opened his other eye, and I was overcome by a bright blue light, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I awoke. Gasping for breath and heart hammering in my chest, the hand on my shoulder was on my phone that I had rolled onto my slumber and just started going off. Now here I am at my kitchen table, eating a Pop-Tart and trying to figure out how I'm going to explain to my undergrad assistant why I can't work this morning. I'm sure this nightmare was brought on by what I found 2 days ago. The thing that brought this stranger back from the forefront of my mind, the reason I'm writing this notebook in the first place. But I never had a nightmare that vivid before. I mean, I could smell his breath, for God's sake. My heart's still pounding. I won't be able to leave the apartment for a while. Not like this, so I guess I'm just writing until my head clears. Or until I think of something better. Looking back at the previous entry I left off 2 days ago, when I encountered the thing that triggered my memory of this event in the stacks, picking up there, the day was like any other. I was in the library working on my dissertation, It's about the oral history of Algonquin-speaking cultures of the Ohio Valley region, and how that, in combination with archaeological evidence, can be used to get a better understanding of pre-colonial and colonial events that lack documentation due to lack of European interest in the affairs of natives. I can go more into the particulars, but that's not really germane to the topic at hand. The point is, I had asked my undergrad research assistants to find any source they could in the archives regarding the oral tradition of the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes regions. As I sat at my table, reviewing what they had laid on my desk, I just closed the book I'd been reading, mentally feeling it as a dead end, and moved to grab the next one in the stack. It was then that I looked up and froze in my seat. There, on the table in front of me, 2 more into the stack Jacob had just brought me, was the book. I'd only held it in my hands for maybe 12 seconds when I first saw it, but its hardback cover, worn nearly black by time, was imprinted in the memory as clearly as the bolts in my leg and the break in my nose. I traced my hand along the gold filigree, nearly invisible, before turning the spine to read its name for the first time. A documentation of the early colonial folk tales of the Great Lake regions, written by a man named Cecil B. DeVries, published in 1937. At first, I simply could not believe it. After I left my alma mater to attend Syracuse for my postgraduate studies, I never thought I would see any remnant of the experience again. Yet, here, plain as day before me, was another archived copy of the very same book that had nearly got me killed. Could it possibly be? I began to think. Is this somehow all against all odds the very same book? There was only one thing I could do to think of to check. Hands shaking, I turned the book so I could see it from the top down. I could see no sizable missing section. The pages through rough, yellowed, and dog-eared were unripped and unbroken. I felt the tangible weight lift off my chest. As relief flushed over me, I was not, in fact, the very same book that had nearly been my death. Taking that as a solace, I was then immediately overcome in the outstanding curiosity. After all, this book was still whole, at long last. I could read whatever it was the stranger was trying so hard to destroy. It was all brimming with anticipation, but when I went to open the tome, I suddenly became very aware of how open the library was. I glanced over my shoulder. Though I could not see anyone watching me, I felt completely exposed, anxious. I tried to remember where the book had been opened to when the stranger was ripping it to shreds. I flipped the pages back and forth desperately, setting the book sideways on the table in front of me. To as best as I could recreate the way I had seen it. After I had gotten it as close as I could recall, I took a note of the page number I had opened it to, said goodbye to Jacob and Neil, and then walked back to the apartment. I knew that the university had recently sunk significant funding into scanning all the archival books and documents onto the online database. Now I knew the book and the page number to look at. So as I stepped through the door and locked each deadbolt 3 times, I simply could not get my laptop out fast enough. The looking took longer than I anticipated. The database was easy enough to navigate. The scan in the book, oh my gosh, the scan of the book that they had was done poorly, and the pages varied between barely legible at best to nearly an entire page of black at worst. I had to scour the internet looking for any copy that was legible, but every link or copy I found either directed back to the Syracuse scan I started with or did not include the pages I was looking for. Eventually, despite the university's policy against removing archival books from the libraries, I was forced to consider the necessity of borrowing the book for a time. Luckily, though, I found a shady link of a scan from someone's personal library posted in 2009. At all the pages, and doing a quick comparison to the legible pages from Syracuse scan it seemed to be the genuine article. Finally, at midnight, I sat down and began piecing together what the book was talking about. The page number that I got was, of course, not exact. The chapter it was within was an overview of what the author referred to as mixed stories, folk tales that showed a blending of native and European cultures, often very early in the colonial era, where necessity drove the colonizers to intermingle and often rely on the nearby locals. The ways these two cultures combine in the stories is fascinating in their own right, often bringing a milieu of European characters, plots, and themes, while adding distinctly American flavor. Sometimes it was extremely surface level. The example given was a classic story of a Faustian bargain, but in the telling, the devil was replaced with the ancient, malevolent forest spirit. It took the form of a shadowy young tribesman. Sometimes it ran deeper, like the native princess who sat on a cliff and cried so many tears for her dead lover that they carved the rock into an arc that can be seen to this day. However, the story that grabbed my attention the most was an example of the rarest kind. A story with roots so deep in both culture that it became impossible to tell who had started the legend. DeVries claimed that he was able to find multiple versions of the story, though many of the sources were personal interviews and therefore very difficult to track down. According to him, it was a story passed down from the earliest French fur trappers around the Hudson Bay. The natives they've engaged with. Most interesting was the note from the author. While the details of the story changed from person to person, the manner of telling it was always the same. DeVries would meet with the person he was interviewing in a private place that was not their home. A cordoned-off closet in a warehouse, a set of stumps in the middle of the woods, fishing in a lake with no one else around. They would insist on no record equipment, not even pen and paper for taking notes. Then they would tell the story once, uninterrupted, answer no more than a few questions at the end, and then would not speak of the story again after that. No retellings, no going back to clarify anything, and no depth discussion. One source went so far as to say that traditionally the story would only be told once a year at the big trapper meetup, when the company men, beavermen, shopkeepers, and traders would all make their way to the same place in the forest to exchange furs for money and other necessities, like hard liquor. He explained it could only be told on the final night. After all the company men had packed their things and turned in for the night, only the trappers sat around the dying embers, whispering their mysteries in hushed tones. In the morning, they would pack up themselves and leave, not to speak to any other living soul about anything for months. With them back against the wall in my bedroom, my eyes scanned the screen hungrily. There was an eagerness in my gut that had reached a fever pitch. The chapter, it was near its end. I thought, just a few more pages, and I'll know for sure what the stranger was in the library had been doing. Well, what he was looking for, all of it. It was within my grasp. I felt my breath coming in heavier as I started to read once more. Interesting. That was part 3A. I wonder if the author delved too much into these historical monuments of folklore, that he learned something he shouldn't have and committed suicide because of it, and whatever was part of that folklore was just haunting him through his dreams. Now I think that's what's going on here. But we got a little bit more to read. All right, let's go into part 3B. Then we got chapter 4 and chapter 5, and we'll be done with the story. But I'm very curious to see how this story wraps up. I'm very curious to see. It began as many things do, with a death. The name of the great hunter from the Bear Clan of the Seneca tribe, changing from telling to telling. Some stories say the name was Wata, which means maple tree, in their tongue. Others say it was Hodsoniga, though that may have been a translation error, since there is a variation of the Seneca for word he's from the Bear Clan. In many tellings, he does not have a name. He is simply referred to as the Great Hunter. In any case, he had died in a hunting accident, and all his village mourned his loss. None, however, mourned him more than his wife. She, oddly enough, is not named in any stories. She is simply referred to by different titles, mostly commonly the woman, the squaw, or the princess, their words, not mine. Her wails of anguish over the death of her beloved prince, over the death of her beloved, pierced the night, and the cries of the woman, along with the pain in their own hearts, called for action. And so, the husbands of the clan gathered outside their long houses, war clubs in hand. It was time for a mourning war. A mourning war, as the name implied, was a kind of war commonly undertaken by Iroquoian peoples after notable, usually unexpected, death. Often performed on the clan level, a mourning war traditionally starts when a powerful woman of the tribe names a war chief and task him with avenging the fallen clansman or clanswoman. The chief and the husbands of the clan would then take of the war path with the explicit goal of capturing prisoners. Once these prisoners were found, they were then brought by hook or by crook back to the village and then offered to their aggrieved clan as communal property. From there, the fate of the captive fell on a spectrum, usually trending towards one of the two options. If a prisoner was deemed suitable and then the matriarchs were willing, they would be kept for a time as the junior members of the clan, a situation often interpreted by Europeans as a form of slavery, before eventually being fully made a part of the clan, often taking the name and titles of the dead clan members they were kidnapped in the name of. In some extreme cases, there were even examples found of the prisoners being eventually elevated to chiefs and being sent to negotiators on peace missions to the tribe they were originally abducted from. However, if the clan was not willing to prisoners, it was deemed suitable. They would instead be brutally tortured and mutilated in a multitude of ways before being executed, often just as brutally. There was one account from the Beaver Wars of the, I'm going to butcher this, Onondaga chief executing 80 captives in this way after his brother was killed in a battle. It's perhaps also worth noting here that the practice of scalping was invented by the Haudenosaunee, to which side of the treatment spectrum a victim would fall dependent predominantly on how long after the death they were brought to the village. In general, those brought in shortly after, while the sting and the anger and the grief associated with the death were still sharp, we tended to find a brutal end at the hands of their captors. All of this to say, as the woman raised up her cry, the young men who had married into the Bear Clan sounded back with their war whoops as they were out for flesh and blood. Within a few days, they found what they were looking for. So, is this going to lead up to the woman that was brutally murdered and all her bones broken? Is this what this is leading up to? Because I feel like this is what it's leading up to. It is here that we are introduced to our other main character. In old tellings, he is simply referred to as the Frenchman. His origin is unclear, changing from source to source. Some say he was a criminal who changed his name and fled to the New World to slip in the hangman's noose. Others say he was a Huguenot, a Calvinist driven from his native home to a place where none could persecute him. A few sources even claim the Frenchman was not French at all, but a German, who had spent his early manhood drowning Anabaptists under the authority of Rome, before suddenly growing a conscience, and his middle age fleeing to the edge of the world to hide his shame. None could recognize him for what he did. In any case, while he may have arrived in New France under Jacques Cartier on the third voyage in 1541, by 1542, he was counted among the 35 killed by the natives in the winter. The Frenchman, however, was not dead. None can say exactly how, but somehow he survived and remained, following the St. Lawrence of a river upstream. And then the southern shore of Lake Ontario, somehow he must have done it. After all, how else could a white man have been found by a Seneca war party at the mouth of the Genesee River on the blood-red evening in 1545? The fight was one-sided and was over quickly, but the Frenchman had 3 years of hard-bitten experience forging and fighting and surviving in the strange new world. The men of the Bear Clan had lifetimes more than he. Along with the advantages of numbers and surprise, he got one good swing off with his hatchet before a blow from a club caught him in the temple and crumpled his body to the ground. He was quickly bound as an animal caught in a trap and marked with black paint to indicate the war chief's recommendation for what should have been done to him upon the return to the village. The war party was split, for they could neither afford to return with only one captive, nor could they only afford to press forward with this angry, ungainly prisoner in tow. So 2 young men were left to bring their captive back to the village, while the rest of the party continued to move westward, Erie territory, and hopefully a larger score. He established a location to reconnect once he'd been delivered back to the tribe, and then the war party set out once more. Meanwhile, the two left behind, hot-blooded and angered at seemingly being passed over for a chance to prove themselves in battle, waited until the Frenchman awoke before poking, threatening, and beating him, all the while gradually herding him back toward the village. In one telling, one of the young men broached the possibility of simply killing him outright, claiming he had attempted to escape, but his compatriot talked him out of it, saying it would be a greater dishonor to neglect their duty than any honor one in a single war could repay. Whatever may have occurred, for 2 days they traveled. At the end of it, the Frenchman stumbled into the palisaded town with his captors at his heels, bruised, starving, and deprived of water, but alive. The young men quickly brought him before the clan matriarchs, and the woman who was counted among the matriarchs saw him for the first time. She saw the black paint on his forehead and knew it meant the war chief had recommended him for cathartic execution. He, for his part, cast his eyes about the village reproachfully, oh my gosh, reproachfully, I cannot say that word. As he caught her appraising him, spat blood from the last blow his captors had given him to the ground at her feet. He elicited another swift kick from another warrior as the other explained the circumstance with which they had found him. He spoke swiftly and anxiously, eager to rejoin the war party. The woman convened to discuss his fate and would have taken him. The woman, however, silenced them with a raising of her hand. She claimed his soul by her right, as the widow of the deceased, as a part of the bounty for her husband's death. The other clan mothers protested, but the woman could not be swayed, and eventually all dissent ceased. But they denied her her rightful prize. She had the man brought to a private place in the woods, in a marshy spot near the burial ground. Though none know or will ever know precisely what happened that night in that patch of forest, this much is certain. By the morning on the next day, the Frenchman was dead, and the woman was set to a new task. This feels, I get, it's like alluding to our author from 1A and 1B. Like, there's a lot of similarities between it, but this feels like just an extended history lesson. I'm not gonna lie, it feels like a history lesson. It is not entirely clear, at least not to the Western storytellers, exactly what the woman said about doing what she did, oh my gosh, why the woman set about doing what she does next. The darker, more sadistic tale is that she was a psychopath, through and through, and her anger over the loss tortured the Frenchman, methodically breaking every bone in his body until the forest howled with his pain and her grief. And then, when his body could no longer withstand it all, and he slipped from his mortal coil, she went about turning him into a trophy, in an act of reasserting control in the midst of her helplessness in the face of death. The more romantically minded claimed that she sought a replacement for her husband, and at first made advances at him out there in the lonely woods. However, upon his rejection, she turned angry and scornful, beating and killing him before deciding that she could not kidnap a replacement for her husband. She could make one. Sources do not agree if one is true or the other is not, nor do they say if it could be some combination of both. But if you want my opinion, I would say this. In order for what happens next to take place, she must have had the site scouted and pre-selected and prepared by collecting materials and tools in the previous days. I would say, therefore, that this was premeditated. Whatever emotion or intent had brought her there, she had always planned on ending it with a captive dead and a work to be done. The village heard screaming all through the night coming from the patch of woods, and the woman did not return to her bed to sleep. When her fellow clanswoman went out to the woods to check on her, they found her preparing a knife next to a 5-foot pit in the ground. The soil there was a dense clay, and over the night she had somehow found a way to fire the inside of the pit till it was as watertight as any pottery jug. A feast somewhat of a marvel within itself was not a particular note to the people who had come out to check on their matriarch. They were too preoccupied by the spectacle before them. Stories describe the Frenchman having been strung up like a muskrat, put in the nearby trees, which is to say upside down and with all limbs splayed apart, to his body made the shape of a star dangling just above the ground. The knife that the woman was preparing was one of her most prized possessions. Its blade was made from volcanic glass, very rare and sharper than any other stone knife, as a wedding gift from her late husband. It had been only rarely used for most delicate of her jobs. Clanswoman looked in horror as she made the first incision, cutting a circle around the foot below the ankle, then beginning to slice in a line down the inner leg, across the groin, around the anus, and up the other leg, before making another circular cut around the other ankle. The woman had begun to skin the Frenchman. Good Lord! None protested, none spoke at all. Even the animals dared not to make a sound. The patch of forest was silent, except for the sounds of obsidian slicing flesh and the woman going about her work. But what could any of them say? By all rights, the Frenchman was hers to do with what she pleased. To try and keep her from doing as she liked with the corpse was as senseless as asking a warrior not to scalp his slain enemies, or asking a cat to stop batting a mouse. Besides, he was only one of those strange pale men. His compatriots had abandoned him years ago. Who would miss him? Still, it did not sit right with them. Scalping an enemy combatant was one thing, torturing a captive was another, but the skinning of a full body was quite something else. It could disrespect the spirits. Who could say what strange medicine these pale men brought from across the seas? One by one, the other women made signs of warding over their breast and left the clearing, resolving independently of each other never to go back to that clearing until all woman's work was done. Eventually, the Frenchman and the woman were alone again, and she continued about her grisly task. Here, every telling dissolves a myriad of details into a single sentence. She skinned him like a beaver and tanned his hide as one would a buckskin, and preserved his organs in a chemical concoction until the moon was right. I find this to be severely lacking in detail, in part because the trappers who told the story to each other would already understand all they entailed, because it misses aspects of Iroquoian culture that have notable implication. So here, for the next several paragraphs, I'll fill in what I imagine the whole thing must have looked like, mostly for the benefit of getting off my chest. Whew. My throat's hurting. I'm not gonna lie, my throat's starting to hurt. It's really, it's really getting there. I'm going to power through. Once the initial cuts had been made along the leg, the majority of the Frenchman's skin could be peeled off, up from the legs, up the torso, and briefly stopping around the armpits to make incisions around the wrist, down the arms, and around the neck, just below the collarbone. Before fully pulling the skin off like peeling off a wet sock, next would come the head, for which a slice would be made from the middle, for the forehead down to the base of the neck and his back, as well as around the eyes before pulling the skin all the way forward and cutting the cartilage off the nose all the way away from the skull. Then that would be his hands and feet, which would require great care and delicacy to remove, undamaging. This was no large matter to the woman. She was the wife of the great hunter, after all. She had spent countless hours skinning and cleaning his kills. After all the Frenchman's hide had been removed, she would scrape the inside of the removed dermis free of any remaining meat and fat before leaving it in the wooden frame to dry overnight. Then she would move on to the organs and muscles. Good Lord. The options for preserving meat in that time were limited, especially considering the lack of access to salt and reliance upon the weather for freezing or refrigeration. Most of the remaining ways left would resolve drying the meat, which was unsuitable to the woman's needs. The only option left to her would be to pickle them. The body would be let down from the tree, and the meat would be pulled and stripped away from the bones, the muscles, and organs, all except for the brain. Would be arranged and organized to the pit she had fired earlier, and the bones would be set back aside for safekeeping. The Haudenosaunee had access to a kind of vinegar made from maple syrup, and she would have poured as much as she could find into the pit after the meat, ideally enough to fully submerge the organic tissue, before covering up and leaving it to sit for a long while. The only organs she could not save were her eyes. The pickling would have done too much to make them inhuman, so as replacement, she foraged or stole and traded for river rocks of the same color as the Frenchman's eyes, before delicately painting the whites, pupils, and strongly colored red blood vessels, leaving the irises shined and unpainted. Between the river rocks and the sheer quantity of the vinegar, the cost would have been exorbitant, and in a case of the vinegar would have almost certainly depleted much of the village's resources. This would have almost certainly raised issue and ire with the others in the village. On top of this, the vinegar would only preserve everything for a short period of time. After a few weeks or a few months, the meat would begin to stink again. But perhaps the woman did not think of that. Perhaps she saw no way around it. Somehow she navigated it all and continued her work. She must have, or at least I can think of it in no other way. After the hides were dry, the second stage of their preparation could begin. The skin would begin scalped second time. This time over the outside to create the texture was associated with buckskin, since human flesh is much thinner than a deep deer pelt. This would likely result in a number of tears that would need to be sewn up and repaired later. Next came the tanning. The solution required certain proteins commonly found in nerves, stem, and brain cells. The other works and fur trappers in the modern day remarked that God gave every creature on the earth just enough brains in their head to tan their hides. The man is no exception. One would have mixed the Frenchman's brain in a jug of water, stirring it until it had a consistency of uncooked scrambled eggs. If you believe she was trying to make a replacement for her husband, she may have added things like walnut shells to the mix as well, which contained tannins that could darken the skin to a deep brown. Frenchman's skin would then be added to the mix. and the jug holding it would be left to set for a long time, maybe a week, maybe a month, who can say. Between that, the organ pickling, and the marsh this was all done in must have been stunk such an eye-watering degree as to strain the imagination. Meanwhile, in the village, life would have gone on. The Haudenosaunee believed that the body of the recently deceased should be kept outright outside their longhouses for 10 days following death, meaning that, at least a week after her project had begun, she would have had to walk past her husband's corpse on her way to the woods, and then walk past him again on her way back in. Who knows what must have gone through her mind each time she did that? Maybe she didn't think about it at all. Wholly obsessed with her fascination with the Frenchman, maybe she tried to ignore it, but each day made it harder and harder to pretend not to care about the memento mori filling her doorway. Maybe she desperately wanted to be her husband. She had it in the woods, resurrecting, but each time she considered stealing away with the body, something, perhaps respect, perhaps fear, stopped her from doing so. After the viewing period, there would have been a great feast as well as a burial, a time when, as the widow must have been the center of attention. Did the other members of her clan dare bring up what she was doing in the woods? Or did they all bow to their grief and authority? At the burial in their cemetery, would they simply ignore the smell wafting over their workstation, with eulogy, if any, would she give for the man who had been the cause of all this? The great hunter killed on the prowl, time after time. Time after that, perhaps before, the war party would have been returned, with whatever captives they had taken. Would the woman claim another captive? Would anybody stop her if she tried? Did anybody bother to tell the men of what was going on, the fate of their first captive? If the men knew, would any try to interject? In my head, I imagine a trial keeping place. Accusations flying and war clubs used as gavels, clamoring for order. Of course, this was not what happened. My mind simply saw a void and projected a fantasy world built of maybe onto it. There was no evidence for anything happening at all. None of the sources speak on it, and the whole and the narrative cannot be filled by any other way with speculation. All we know is that sometime between a week and a month pass before the woman decides that the time is right to finish what she started. Is this where the story is picked back up? The woman had many talents. She was, as already demonstrated, quite adept in the preservation of meat and the production of hide and wearable material. And when she determined enough time had passed and the moon was right, she put some of her other skills to use. For example, she was a rather capable seamstress, and she put to use her cross-stitch and overhand as she sewed a Frenchman's hide back together. She was very careful and made sure to sew a backing of deer leather along each seam to ensure none of the important bits leaked out. She sewed and she replaced the bones and the muscles and the organs in their proper place until the last stitch was made. And then made a full length of a man laying within it. As the sun set, as the stars gleamed brightly in the new moon, she showcased her final talent. She was a matriarch of the Bear Clan, and the Bear Clan was known for their powerful medicine and connection to the world of spirits. So deep in the woods of the dark continent, untold and unsung, the woman performed her dark rites. Villagers would have called it a bad medicine. The Frenchman's kin would have called it a witchcraft. The woman would have called it unnecessary, or perhaps experimental. So she danced, chanted, cavorted, sprinkled potions, and sacrificed. One source even claims she had spoke to a demon called Old Scratch, though this is dubious, as the name also makes an appearance in other verifiable false folk tales of the period. Regardless, in the darkness just before the dawn, in the pit soaked in vinegar and God knows where else, something opened in the Frenchman's new eyes of stone and sat up. Back in the village, all was quiet. Oh, I'm running out of breath. Holy moly. They had posted guards facing the west in case the Erie decided the time for retaliation to come. The hour was late, though. The men were tired of war and the women tired in general. So, besides the vigilant looking west, Tom people they did not hear when the sounds from the wood. Man, my goodness. So the woods rose up to a fever pitch. Nor did they hear when they stopped, or when the sounds of a woman screaming began. When the guards at last noticed the screaming, they split themselves. One group moving towards the longhouses to alert their tribesmen, one towards the unearthly shrieking. When the latter group got to the clearing, they were met with a grisly sight. Countless dead animals, their bodies strewn about in a manic fashion. The remnants of the vileness performing the last night. The frames and tools, jugs of preservation liquid used in the previous work piled off to the side. Afterthoughts of the morning when the thing was accomplished, and there in the middle of it all was the fired pit. And inside of the pit, a shrieking woman. Her arms and legs had been methodically broken. Each bone in her limb had received a blow that snapped them clean in two. Nothing crushed that would come after. She had been laid in the pit, and her wails of agony with the bottom echoed and bounced around her macabre, mixing a bowl before fleeing into the darkness of the woods. The Frenchman was nowhere to be seen. The warrior stood, mouths agape, shocked at the scene before them. Eventually, one was shaken from his stupor by the woman's cries and ran to try and help her out of the pit. The crowd moved to the action, but their fellow tribesmen quickly went to help him. They pulled the woman out. Her pain was only worsened by being moved, and the men tried desperately to comfort her as one attempted to apply what little field medicine he knew to try and make splints. Eventually, the woman screaming began to form coherent words. "Leave me! I'm dead already! We're in the village! Flee! The white ash will not stop him! Nothing will stop him!" The other group of guards who had been sent to warn the village never made it. The thing that was once the Frenchmen saw to that. Devery's sources does not make it clear exactly how they would have this part of the story the author of the Scholar Tome left in it. As he left it, added some necessary color. Fell upon it quickly, and though the outnumbered it and possessed weapons while it did not even possess clothes, the battle was decisive. It could move faster, strike harder than any war club. And of the party of three, it quickly brought one of them down, grabbing their hair and splitting their head on a rock. Compatriots of the fallen warrior did try to save him, raining bows down on their assailant and moving into the cut kind of with knives, but the blows landed and crunched his bones, audibly breaking him. Did not slow its hands or elicit any sign of pain, and the knives did cut holes in its soft hide. Nothing spilled out, so there was some invisible membrane holding its organs in. At this point, it cast its stone-cold eyes on the remaining warriors, and the elder of the two had told the younger to run and alert the village. The old man raised his tomahawk and turned back towards it, as the young man at first hesitated, and turned and ran through the woods. Did not hear the old man die, but he was within sight of the village when it caught him, and began to beat him when it was done. Only one figure rose from the ground, turned its head toward the village, and began walking. Where was I? Oh shoot, I lost my place. The woman's cries had subsided now, though not due to a decrease in volume. Instead, the act of splinting her limbs caused such a shock and agony that she would frequently lose consciousness before slowly regaining it. In this way, her constant wails became intermittent, stopping and starting as she lost and then regained awareness of her body. By the time both legs had been set and her right arm was being bound. It was taking her longer to come back to herself each time, and the warriors were beginning to discuss who would bring her back to the village. No sooner they had begun to figure out the logistics, however, than the strong smell of smoke overpowered the latent smell of rot present in the clearing. For the first time in many minutes, they turned their heads back toward the village, and their eyes went wide as they saw a bloom of light glowing in the middle distance. The palisades were on fire. Immediately forgetting the first aid they had been rendering, they picked up the weapons and ran back, hoping they were not too late, praying to the stars and the Great Spirit that whatever awaited them could be stopped. As they came to the town and covering their mouths, ran through the spiraling, now oven-like palisades, the storytellers gave their first description of the thing that was once the Frenchman. Okay. I'm going to say this again. I get what the author is going for, but this is extremely wordy. This is so wordy. I get it's supposed to represent what the author in 1A and 1B went through, and that the stranger is possibly this Frenchman, but this is like dragging on. I still got a lot to read here. Not to the dismay of the author. I am saying I appreciate all he's writing, and he definitely put a lot of love and work into this. I'm just saying it's extremely wordy and exhausting to get through. The thing, as it was, and henceforth be called in all accounts, was described as looking close enough to a man from a distance, bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, and hair, passing for living. However, closer inspection from a distance made the difference stark. Whatever bound its bones together and allowed them to carry its weight did not seem to allow also blind its flesh and organs, and so it moved the weight of the whole thing would shift around like a sloshing of a wineskin. Even from a distance, the parts most affected by gravity, the feet, legs, and gut when standing, seemed to bulge, while the arms, chest, and face seemed to sag. So all its internals were compelled by gravity to the lowest point, and only the strength of the seams and the hide itself prevented everything from spilling out through the heels. When it moved, it was unnaturally quick and brutal efficient, as though every motion was as final as death, as no more heeded to the laws of momentum of biomechanics than they did the laws of man. Surrounded by the fiery village, they could see his naked skin glistening in the firelight as though it covered in a sacred oil. He was standing before the exit of burning longhouses and paid no mind to the three warriors as they surrounded him from the remaining three sides, bows and axes at the ready. They tried not to think about the dead surrounding them. They banished the observation that many of the men triumphed only days before the eerie lay now within their eyes gouged, heads carved open, and the brains scattered about. They only focused on what they could save, what they could kill. The single longhouse remaining, and then standing motionless before. They began to creep towards it. As they closed distance, it became more dreadfully clear that the thing, if it was a man, was man no longer. Alright, I'm going to take a water break. Hold on. Within 30 feet, the rotted and vinegar smell began to overpower the smell of the smoke, and the nature of its skin was made clear to them. All of it, from head to toe and balls to backside. As one storyteller said, of the same texture of their moccasins, and was dyed unnaturally brown, so it looked more like a horrific painted leather sculpture than any recognizable human being. Oh, shoot, where was I? The holes by the seams in the eyes and around its wounds showed pinkish red flesh beneath, though no blood escaped. Most fearful to the warriors, however, was the smear of white ash across its chest and face. White ash, to the natives of the continent, held a similar place in folklore as silver in the European tradition. Pure, cleansing, and a tool of good medicine that could be used to vanquish or harm evil spirits. Within this mind, the presence of the ash smeared across it, and what could now that they were closer to be identified as cuts from a knife or spear, was an ill omen indeed. They remembered now that the woman's cried warnings, they could not kill it. Their nerve began to waver. Despite their best attempts to ignore them, they began to notice the bodies piled up by the doors of their other burning longhouses. All of them. For a moment, considered running and abandoning their village. It was at this precise moment that the people within the longhouses awoke by the fire began to run out. The first out of the door was a woman, leading her son by the hand. They stopped at the door when they saw the thing, but with the fire at their backs, they had no choice but to run through the doorway. She shouted and commanded her son as they came to the door to try and run in opposite directions, but the thing was faster. Cut each of them by the throat before they had made it 4 feet from each other to the door. Then, as easily as if they were no more than river stones, lifted them off the ground by their chins and slammed their heads together. A sickening crunch was heard, and the boy and his mother collapsed to the ground, unmoving. All the while, its eyes, if you can call them that, never wavered from the longhouse. The men did not think it possible for emotion to be seen in the river stones. They could swear they saw hatred in those paintings. More people appeared in the doorway, and the thing began to moving towards them. It's like some kind of demented, like, Wendigo. It's kind of sick. At this, all thoughts of running fled the men's heads, and they fell upon the walking corpse with axes and tomahawks in the fury of a raccoon cornered by a bear. Then they could kill it, but they hoped with numbers they might sever its arms or a leg, and give the final villagers a chance to escape in the woods. As they fought, more men came out of the longhouse, weapons and tools and burning sticks in hands, and joined the melee with whatever they had. Knives and chisels and arrows, gripped in fist and cut and pierced it, clubs and hammers and stones raised down on its limbs and torso and head. 20 men in total joined in the fray. 20 was not enough. Each time they threatened to bring into the ground to restrain it, it would manage to throw them off of worm its way out. And it's always managed to kill at least one of them. At least one they attempted to swarm him again. In the end, they all laid, dead or dying, at its feet between the longhouse. Their sacrifice had not been in vain, however. Some woman and child were able to flee out of the longhouse door and break from the woods. In the coming days, they would scatter into the wind. Some were picked up by an eerie war band looking to recoup the people who had been kidnapped days or weeks before. Some made it to the Iroquoian villages, some wandered back to the burnt or husk The villagers found the ashen remains of the longhouses and simply lay down there and let their sorrow overcome them. However, many did escape. It was certainly not a majority, as they ran away. The survivors say they saw a thing walking into the longhouses to kill the survivors who remained. The last image the story gives off of the thing was once the Frenchman as a little girl claiming she saw him leaving the longhouse and walking back in the direction of the burial ground. In that form, the direction, the woman's shrieks filled the night again and echoed through the woods for hours before finally falling silent. None of the survivors from the village ever saw the thing or the woman ever again. And the story ends with a warning: beware of the forest and beware of the new land. There are things in the woods that are greater than you, whatever you might call them. They walk about there, and they hear what they said about them. So do not hail any strangers while on your trap line. Do not follow after the sounds of human movement when you are alone. Move. Most importantly, be cautious of what you say when you think no one is around. After all, you never know what may be listening. The book continues after that. The author begins to dissect the many cultural influences at play, particularly focusing on the French folk tales of revenants and looking at the similarities between the story and Hyatt's and tales of witch doctors killing people and turning them into zombies. I'm sure after that it proceeds into a very good analysis about how different cultures and oral traditions blended together in the New World. But I stopped reading at the end of the page. I simply could not focus on the text anymore. I was too lost in my own mind. Of course, I don't think the monster from a probably fake, poorly sourced, over 100-year-old story is the same homeless man that nearly killed me in the stacks 10 years ago. Even disregarding the obvious impossibilities involved in that, it wouldn't be consistent with the character proposed in the story. For one thing, my homeless man very much had clothes on, and for another thing, he wasn't covered in new stitches to patch up ancient knife wounds. But still, I found myself thinking of that old French explorer who wanted nothing more than to disappear off the edge of the map and be forgotten by everyone. I thought of that stranger of the stacks, 10 years ago, the way he savagely tore these pages, cramming them into his mouth and swallowing them like he wished it to absorb it all through his stomach, into its stomach, perhaps last. Last I thought of the icy blue eyes that weren't eyes, staring past me, yet at me, transfixing me with such hatred as I had never known before that fateful day. The memory of those eyes transfixed me to my couch and haunted my sleep. The next day, I brought this notebook as well as others and started writing. I don't think I'll be working today. I'll text my assistant and give them the afternoon off. I've been writing for nearly 4 hours and between the emotional toll of telling the story of my lack of restful sleep last night, I'm exhausted. Hopefully getting this all written down, I will help feel better tomorrow. Ava's trying to put something together for Eli's birthday, and I'd like to be back to the regular self before going out. Either way, this journal is proving to be better than expected. I feel like a weight's been lifted off my chest. It's good to talk like someone understands and believes me, even if that someone is just myself. Maybe I won't throw this one on the river after all. Anyway, my hand is cramping up again. Maybe I'll write some more tomorrow. Goodbye until then. It's late. Okay, it's 1 a.m. I've been reading since 10. It's been 3 hours. Oh, this is gonna take forever to edit. The story's great. Don't get me wrong. It's wordy, re-listen, but it's great. The descriptions are very brutal, disgusting, and vile. But we're almost done. We're on to part 4, part 5, and then I'll give you my review of it at the very end. So I hope y'all have been staying. Y'all have been listening up to this point. I'm guessing you have. But if you have, good on you. Go tell the author how great of a job he's been doing. I'm tired. Okay, let's go to part 4. A final entry in the spiral notebook found at the scene of the crime. I must be going insane. I was right about not being able to leave the apartment. It's been 6 hours since I finished the last entry. I have not so much as considered opening the door. What did I not anticipate how much stronger it would become over me this time? Not only can I not leave this apartment, I can barely leave the room. Anxiety and fear are part of it. Every time I let the door out of my sight, I feel nearly certain that when I around the corner again, he'll be standing there, not moving. Yet it's gotten so bad that the last time I got up to use the bathroom, I could swear I saw a shadow cast by the door light I've kept perpetually on all day. Oh my gosh. Cast by the door light I've kept perpetually on all of today. Took me a full 10 minutes standing there to work up the courage to confront him, only to find nothing there and a dead bug in the lampshade responsible for the shadow. Dead bug. You got tricked by a dead bug. Where the flip was I? That was 2 hours ago. Since then, I have seriously considered using a bottle if I needed to go again. I cannot let the door out of my ready sight. Even the balcony isn't safe anymore. For even though I cannot see the door from it, I can also see all the people too small to make out details from up there. Walking around below, any of them might be him, and I wind up going crazy trying to watch the door and scrutinize the flow of people below. Feels like I'm trying to stare down a rattlesnake while dodging traffic. Makes me feel sick, so here I am, confined to my kitchen and the couch in my TV room. I can't even go to bed. This bout of restless unease is worse than it normally is. I would be a liar if I said I wasn't common. I've had bouts of this every so often for the last 10 years. I know it's paranoid. I know it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't stop it. I know it's all in my head in the same way I knew the shadow was going to kill me. Even still, if it wasn't the anxiety, I'd be able to deal with it. This time, though, it feels different. Something has to shifted, and not for the better. I'll do my best to describe it. Have you ever felt like your story's already been told? Like the ink is dry on the pages, the spine is bound, and now the only choice left is to either see it to the end, or set down where you are and just never finish it. To be clear, I don't mean that something has been chosen my path for me, or that everything before me is fated. I'm kind of freaking myself out now. My closet's right next to me. I think my I'm freaking out. I think I'm so tired right now. Oh. Clear, I don't mean that something has chosen my path for me, or that everything before me is fated in any sort of spiritual sense. It feels more impersonal than that. It feels more like I'm walking on an extremely well-traveled path, so high traffic to the eons of people before me have worn what was once a flat and normal road into the deep and narrow canyon, far too steep to even consider staying on the sides, far too far along to go any way but forward. In this way, I feel set into a track not so much by any kind of malicious force or divine destiny, but more so by a simple weight of everyone who came before me. Like my life has been told 100 times before and will be told 100 times again, with different names and faces and backgrounds, but always the same result, like I will simply be another number on a page or a name on the monument as I am brought walking as much as I carried to the other possible outcome, death. I think this is what I'm afraid of. Not death, but simply being another one among many. Another corpse in the mass grave, nameless and unremembered. Just another book in the archives, notable only in the way my pages were eaten by a deranged monster. I know logically that the stranger is not going to come for me, but as I said before, knowing does not stop it. I feel like he's watching me. Even now as I write, I feel like I look up from my notebook, I'll see him. At the end of the hall, one eye peeking around the corner and fixing me in place like a spotlight. Doesn't matter if he's really a 400-year-old ghost made of flesh or not. He still haunts me like a wraith in a graveyard. I can feel his hatred rising up through my floorboards, real as anything. As much as I know he's out of my life forever, I also know somehow, that he wants to eradicate me. As surely and as entirely as he did the tomb and the stacks, till nothing remains of what I am but a name, like Cecil B. DeVries, who has no record of his existence besides now nearly lost to history, or worse, until I do not even have a name anymore, like that poor Seneca village, guilty of nothing more than a complacency, like the woman who cried for hours as every bone in her body was broken. Like the Frenchman who believed the greatest tale of all was to be seen and remembered. In my last entry, I described feeling like a weight had been lifted. Well, that's still true, compared to how I was earlier. I feel like I'm floating, or falling. Now I guess I'm just waiting to see which one it is by how hard I hit the ground. I can't write anymore. Goodbye for now. The next page was hastily torn out. Hey Jay, it's me. Whiskey? Yeah, you got a bunch of other women calling you at odd hours of the night? Well, it's 2:30 in the fucking morning, Whiskey. Easy, it's important. It's about the jumper. Whiskey? What in the hell could be so important about that jumper that it could wait until... a minute? What, are you still in the office? Yeah, been working. That's not working at 2:30 in the morning? Whiskey, what's happening? Is everything alright? Well, no, that's not what I'm calling it. Is something at home? No, if you just... Is it Rick? I swear, if he's back in the bottle again. Signs of an animal predation. What? That's what I'm calling you about. Found signs of animal predation on the jumper's body, specifically on the pieces of the skull that were recovered. I was trying to reconstruct the skull, maybe see if I could find a wound of some kind, and I noticed it, the markings I told you about. I thought they might be marks from scalpels or other medical implements from some past trauma, but as we were reconstructing it, I realized that they were inside of the skull. And, well, there aren't a lot of medical tools that make marks like that. For my money, those scrapes were either made by teeth or some implement that like that. Maybe a fork or... a fork. I don't know, maybe? My point is that there is any chance animal or something got to him before the officers locked down the site. Well, we got there pretty quick after the call came in. It looked like the folks have been gathered around it for some time. I just need to know if it's possible, Jay. Possible, yes, but unlikely. Yeah. Well, shit. Guess we better start building a case then. Try to figure out what other kind of guy walks into the man's apartment, caves his head in, and starts chowing down in his brains before throwing him off a balcony. I could think of an option. Oh, yeah? Well, you read the Notebook, too, didn't you? Oh, come on, Whiskey. Don't tell me you believe in ghosts. Fine, I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in weird psycho homeless guys getting obsessed with something crazy like a fairy tale about a zombie burning down a village. I believe in what people in that state of mind can do to other people, and I believe in their capability to hold a grudge far, far longer than anyone would consider reasonable. Whiskey. But the guy's own admission, that was 500 miles away, and 10 years ago. You really think some tweaker hitchhiked all over the miles, all those years, just to kill some guy he fought in a library once? Maybe he didn't follow him. Maybe he just moved separately and saw a guy recognize him, and just decided to pick up where he left off. Oh yeah, homeless schizo moves 500 miles to Syracuse, New York, looking for opportunity. Get real. I just think it's possible. Possible. Maybe, but not likely. Just like everything else you've turned away from this case. You can't honestly believe that this theory is more likely a random crime of opportunity, can you? I don't know what I believe, Jay, but I know whatever I did took an elevator past 12 full floors of other potential crime of opportunity, all to choose the guy with 3 fucking deadbolts on his door, all of which, by the way, mysteriously broken without damaging the door frame. You really don't think there's anything weird going on here? Anything at all? Whiskey. You think I'm crazy, don't you? Well, alright, Mr. Reasonable. Answer me this. What's the jumper's name? What? His name, Jim. Tell me his name, what his name is. I'm in bed. I don't have the file in front of me. Bullshit. You've been hounding me about this case for a full week. Now, there's no way in hell you don't know his name by heart. Whiskey. I don't know what. Here's maybe what you can warm up with an easier one. What's his father's name? Michael Clayton. Correct. How many times has he called you asking for development of his only son's death? None. Correct again. What's his friend name? The one whose birthday they were going to celebrate. Whiskey, I'm not going to. Eli Smith. His name is assistant. Either of them. This is Neil Patel and Jeba Morgan. You did follow-up interviews with them. Put them in the file you sent to me. Don't tell me you don't remember any of them. Either. Can you tell me how many times any of them have reinforced their own friends, boss's name, or recorded interviews? None, Whitney. Shut the fuck up! Alright, right again. Now one more time. What's the jumper's name? The guy all this is about. The guy who just slid back into a morgue fridge. The center of all this. What is his name? I don't know off the top of my head, Whiskey. I don't know either. I realized it as I was sitting there typing the report. I'd write his name, and my fingers would just move on their own. I looked up and realized I couldn't even read the name. I just typed out. I just skimmed it and said, that dead guy. In my head, no matter how hard I tried to read it, I know I've typed it out 50 times in the last hour, but I couldn't tell you what it is. I got up and cutting this kid open, and I can't even remember his fucking name. Kid. Whiskey? Kid, guy, jumper, you know what I mean. Whiskey, you're going to hate me for asking this. Then don't. But does this have anything to do with the breakdown you told me about this afternoon? Fuck you, Jim. I'm just saying. Oh, you're just saying, huh? You're just saying that old Whitney is going crazy? Just saying she's probably off her fucking gourd again? Like last time? She was doing so well, too. No major episodes in a decade and change, and now this? What a shame! Well, maybe I fucking am going crazy, Jim. Maybe I can't get enough sleep. Maybe I've been throwing myself into a work isolating maybe I'm fucking spiraling here. Maybe I can't stop thinking about this jumper's name or that black kid's face, or the shape of the fucking burned out husk on the highway of death. Maybe I can't stop thinking about what I can't remember. Maybe that makes me crazy, but I know that I can't remember either. So I don't pretend like there isn't anything a little weird going on right now. Don't act like you don't see it too, and I'm not fucking dismissing. You done? Yeah, I'm done. Sorry. Okay, no problem. Look, Whiskey, it's 2:30 in the morning. I'm tired. You're sleep deprived. Nothing we say here will be productive. If it is this mysterious traveling crackhead that I did, then maybe he's already a week to get away. 4 more hours isn't going to hurt anything. Now, how about you get some sleep, and we both go handle this when I get into the office first thing in the morning. Yeah? Sure. Fine. All right. You gonna call Rick, or are you good to drive home? I'll probably just sleep here. I got a blanket and everything. Whiskey. Oh, shut up. I'll be fine. Won't be the first time I've bedded down here. All right. Just what? Just take care of yourself, Whiskey. Thanks, Jay. I will. Okay. I'll see you in a few hours. See you. Bye. Bye. That breakdown was very fun to read because I feel the exact same way. So that works perfectly. What time is it? It's 1:20 in the morning. Great. All right. We're on the final part. This is great. I like the story. It's good. I love it to death. Let's see how it ends, okay? Let's get into part 5 right now. Found on a page torn from a spiral notebook at the scene of the crime. He's here. I don't know how, but I can hear him. I woke up on the couch, and there he was, outside the front door. He woke me up. Knock, knock, knock. Every 3 minutes, like clockwork, like an automaton. I saw him through the peephole. Those eyes, they saw through the door. He was looking at me. Not past, at. He hasn't aged a day. He wants to kill me, erase me, and he's knocking. He could break down the door at any time he pleases. He knows it. I know it, but he's knocking. Breaking it down would be too loud. He doesn't want an audience. No witnesses. None to remember. Have to write. No phone signal. Internet's out. Don't know why or how. It doesn't matter. No gun. Got a kitchen knife. Going to try to escape to climb our balcony with a sheet. While hiding in this apartment, if you find it, I'm dead. He killed me. I can hear him messing with the locks. I can hear locks starting to move. Gotta move now. Locking the ceiling. My name is writing illegible. I'm writing illegible. I was killed by writing illegible. Remember me. I love you, Dad. Goodbye. You have 12 missed calls. You have 7 new messages. Message 1, 6:45 a.m. Hey, Whiskey. Hey, Whiskey. It's Jay. I'm on my way to the office right now. I just want to say I'm sorry for what I said a few hours ago. You had woken me up, and I was worried you woke up Sarah too. And you know what? It was my week with her. And then you started saying all that stuff about the case, and anyway, point is, I was a little irritable, and I apologize for that. Call me back when you have a chance. Otherwise, I'll be over around 9 to go through our findings with the autopsy. See you soon. Bye. Message 2, 7 a.m. Hey, honey, it's me. Woke up and realized you weren't home. Figured you might have pulled out an all-nighter at the office and just forgot to text. About to leave for work, so I won't be here when you get back. I've had donut and remember to bring the trash out, so that's covered. Don't worry about all the dishes. I'll do them when I get back. Oh, and don't forget we've got the reservation tonight, so I'll give you enough time to get ready. All right, that's all I can think of. Love. Love you, honey. Call me back when you can. All right, bye. Oh, man. What the flip happened? Message 3, 7:02 a.m. Hello, we've been trying to reach you covering your vehicle's extended warranty. You should have received a notice in the mail about your car's extended warranty eligibility. Since we've gotten a response, you've given in your final courtesy call before we close your file. Please call us back to discuss the matter. Message 4, 7:05 a.m. Hey, Rick again. Just heard about what happened to your work this morning. Just trying to make sure you're okay. Please call me back. Please. Message 5, 7:07 a.m. Honey, please answer your phone. I need to talk to you. Message 6, 7:10. Answer me, please. Message 7, 7:14 a.m. Damn it, honey, pick up the fucking phone. I just need to know if you're alright. I know I haven't always been the best to you, but just please pick up the phone. What? What do you mean the cops are here? I haven't done shit. I don't know what they've been looking for. Oh, dear God. End of message. And then we have something, a conversation between D and P. Good morning, Syracuse. It's now 10 o'clock, and this morning news with WSAR. I'm Ryan Dean. And I'm Richard Polonsky. We'll begin with this hour with a shocking report from downtown. At around 4 this morning, the police responded to a shots fired called at the medical examiner's office, seemingly in response to a break-in, resulting in one confirmed death. Oh boy. I think the homeless man killed her. Yes, the footage you've seen now is the aftermath found this morning when the police arrived. Though the police have not yet released any details, you can see that it appears the suspect rammed his car into the window, shattering it. That's right, Ryan. According to the police, he did not appear to take anything before leaving, likely scared off by the alone witness and victim. Dr. Whitney Faber, a pathologist working for the county coroner, was in the office, apparently sleeping after work and partially a long night. They believe the suspect was surprised to see her, killed her in the ensuing struggle, and fled in a panic. Police have not yet revealed the identity of the suspect, and the investigating is still ongoing. Harrowing stuff, Rachel. In lighter news, the show Hadestown has come back to Landmark Theater, and when we come back, we'll give you the backstage tour of how this troupe begins the ancient myth to modern life. More on that later. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Sean. Hey, Jim. Jesus, you sound awful. So do you. Been getting enough sleep? No. You? No. Nothing good in this autopsy either. Nothing definitely anyway. All I can infer is the death was caused by a blunt force trauma, luckily from a weapon or tool of some kind. But given the state she was found in, I don't think you need a pathologist to figure that one out. Oh, I know. I'm sorry, man. No, I'm okay. No, man, I'm really sorry. I know how important this is, and I tried. Man, I sourced the body. I mean, did everything in the book. Even ran a talk scan, and there's just nothing. Zilch. Zero. Nothing but bruises and broken bones and crushed windpipe and fractured skull. I know that after the lack of evidence at the scene, you all were really hoping to the bank of the autopsy for leads, but Sean, it's okay. I know you did your best, and nobody could have done better. We'll just have to get some other way, but that's not on you. You did good work, Whiskey would be proud. Hey, thank you, Jim. Of course, just one last question for you. Sure, what is it? Nothing major, and it's going to sound stupid when I ask this. It's just something I need to check. You don't need to add qualifiers, Jim. Just lay it on me. Sure. What's the victim's name? Huh? Jim, it's Whiskey. I know, Sean. What's her real name? I meant her full government name. It's Whitney Tommyrus Faber. Okay, now Sean, I need to be honest with you. Did you read that off the autopsy report just now? Yeah, I did. I just knew it was her as Whiskey, so I never really learned her full name, I guess. Okay, thank you, Sean. That's all I needed from you. Sure, Jim, no problem. Take care of yourself. You too, Sean. Get some sleep. As if. Yeah, I know. All right, then. Good night. Good night. From a private interview with Jim Abernathy, he did not know I was recording. This is from Jim. I think it was the bullets that finally got me. Over the course of the week, between Whiskey's death and the night in question, I was pouring in every detail. I don't think I really thought of this connection to the jumper or the dumb journal, but night after night, if it wasn't maternal with Sarah, I found myself scoring the evidence for both cases anyway. I think I just wanted a closure that was the only place I could think to look. Thing is, I started to notice something with Whiskey's death. It wasn't in the info we had because she didn't really have anything besides a blueprint for the order of events at the scene. There were no suspects. Whiskey had no known enemies, no argument with her husband, no skeletons in her closet that could have possibly led to everything pointed to it being a simple case of wrong place, wrong time. Exactly the kind of case that relies on other evidence to possibly identify a perpetrator. We didn't have any of that either. No prints, no blood, or DNA that was in Whiskey's. CCTV didn't catch anything, and our one eyewitness, the janitor in the neighborhood building, who had
heard the shots and called 911 and get a good look at the guy as he fled the scene. The only thing the criminal took from the scene was Whiskey's laptop, which we found 2 blocks away, missing a motherboard and smashed beyond use. That got rid of any chance of our burglar getting caught when he tried to fence something. Even the shots were accounted for. The guy said he had heard 6 shots in rapid succession, and we're now able to confirm that all of them came from Whiskey, who licensed the concealed carry and kept Whiskey. Oh my gosh. Who licensed and concealed carry that kept her old service pistol in her desk. We had nothing, but sometimes even a lack of evidence can be revealing. You see, I'd started to notice a few things in those long nights. I spent poring over the files of evidence. We didn't even have the long thing. We didn't have a lot of things that could solve the case, but there were a lot of other things missing too. For example, the way a perpetrator entered the building was by smashing through one of the plate glass walls on the main floor, presumably with the use of the car, given the fact that the wall facing the parking lot and the hole of the entry was quite large. Thing is, there was no skid marks on the pavement outside, no tire impressions in the grass in front of the window, no parts or fluids from a wrecked car at the scene or leading away from it. Our eyewitness didn't even hear a car anywhere on the road at all, let alone fleeing the scene. This would imply that the car was not used at all. Instead, the perpetrator simply walked up to the glass and broke it himself, possibly with a tool, let's say a sledgehammer. It would have taken time that Whiskey could have been shooting at him, but it's possible. The next thing I noticed what makes the whole narrative even more unlikely, though she had said on our call that night that she would have been sleeping in the waiting area. That's not where Whiskey was found. Instead, she was found in a crumpled pile in front of her desk. The office official narrative is that when she was woken by breaking the glass, she reacted quickly and immediately fled. The suspect pursued her after getting out of the car, bashing a weirdly much larger hole in the glass, chasing her through the building and their office on the opposite side of the building, where she received her gun and shot at him several times before he closed the distance, beat her to death, grabbed her laptop, and split. So imagine you're Whiskey. You just woke up in the sound of the crazed psycho breaking a window not 20 feet from you. Now he's chasing you through the building, gaining on you, and now you know there's a gun in the just the next room. What do? You run in, close the door, and lock it out or barricade it to buy time to get your weapon. Here's the thing. The office door showed no signs of forced entry, no marks for crowbars or hammer, no busted hinges or splintered door frames, nothing. Which means only one of 2 logical things. Either the perpetrator in the middle of a break-in, heart pounding and adrenaline rushing, stopped and took the time to carefully pick or shim the lock before savagely killing a woman, or Whiskey didn't lock the door. First option, despite being logically impossible, is as absurd as it sounds. As for the second option, as though maybe he was gaining so quick she didn't have time to lock the door. But that doesn't gel with her having time to get off the shots as she did, and the idea is she just not thinking about the locking it. Well, it's just not Whiskey. I mean, we've known each other for 30 years. We've seen Kuwait together. Even as emotional as she was on the call, even as panicked as she must have been, I've had a hard time believing that she would have made a mistake like that. But I said it's possible. Maybe she did forget, or maybe she did get 6 shots off before he pounced on her. Hell, maybe the perpetrator did pick the lock. All possibilities are all good maybes. Maybe. Stack enough maybes up, I thought, and maybe we solve this thing. The whole thing topples over and crushes under its weight. Like I said, the bullets were the straw that broke the camel's back for me. As I mentioned above, it was the gunshot that actually brought police to the scene, as they were confronted to have been fired from Whiskey's Beretta M9. 6 shots heard by the janitor, 6 bullets missing from the magazine, 6 spent casings on the floor of Whiskey's office. Though no bullets themselves were found, the CSI report mentioned finding holes in the drywall opposite the door. It seemed pretty open and shut. In stressful situations like that, even experienced shooters aiming carefully can miss. If Whiskey was able to get off 6 shots after the door opened, then by about shot 4, she wasn't aiming carefully, but something kept nagging at me. I kept looking at the picture of the bullet holes in the wall. Whereas that one particular looked funny. The report said that the odd shape of the opening was due to 2 bullets simply impacting the wall too close to each other. Excuse me. But it kept bugging me, and that's when it hit me. That wasn't 2 bullet holes. That was 1 bullet keyholing. Interviewer: I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with firearms. What's keyholing? When a bullet hits a target sideways, leaving an odd opening that's longer than the ordinary bullet wound. The drywall had crumbled a bit around the hole so it looked like it, expecting to see 2 bullet holes in them. That's what you would see, but looking closely at the picture, there was no doubt in my mind. Keyholing like that can really only be caused by a few things: a shitty gun, shitty ammo, or if the bullet hits something and passes through, causing it to tumble. We know it wasn't the first two, which really only leaves one option. Whiskey hit him at least once. The bullet went clean through his body, kept on coming and beat her to the pulp. Then, when he finished, he ran off into the night with a laptop that he ditched 2 blocks later, all while having a hole in him that should have been leaking like a bad faucet. And yet, not a single piece of his DNA could be identified at the scene. No blood found if that wasn't Whiskey's. Not one drop. I tried to square it with logic. Maybe the bullet in his hammer or something had deflected off of it. Maybe the perpetrator was wearing a ton of layers and the bullet hit in a place that would still slow it, but no harm the perpetrator. Maybe. As I leaned back in my chair, I realized I was getting very tired of all the maybes. More on a feeling than anything. I remember what Whiskey had called me about that night. She was freaking out about how nobody seemed to remember the jumper's name. More on a feeling than anything else, I decided to give Sean a call. And well, you have those recordings, so you know how that went. There was something else though. See, while I was talking to Sean, I was looking out of my office window. It was raining that evening. I remember it all, watching the cars pass by right about when I was heading up. I saw him, plain as day, on the other side of the road, an old homeless man watching me through my window in a grimy green windbreaker that looked straight up the 90s. A set of cheap cargo pants. I couldn't make out the finer details, though, the rain streaking down the glass. But from what I could discern, he looked like hell. His skin was even brown tone, like old leather broken up by what few scars I could make out from his face. Even from that far away, though, I could feel his eyes on me. I felt like they were burning a hole in me. I saw him move a hand up into his chest, slow and unwavering as a surgeon, and put 2 fingers inside a hole in the chest. I realized then that it was just one hole he was reaching into. What I had mistaken for a pattern was in fact a series of dime-sized holes. If I took the time to encounter them, I'm sure I would have encountered 6. So that something new occurred to me. I wiped the glass off the window as my breath had begun to fog it. If I was right, one of the bullets had keyholed, and there were only 5 bullet holes in the walls of the crime scene. Before I had time to fully flesh out the implications of that, his hand moved again, in a short jerk reminiscent of removing a splinter, and his hand slowly and methodically fell to the side. I know I saw the slight glint of bullet jacket from a fall over the grip, and a small flash of reddish pink, similar to an undercooked steak under his windbreaker, before the rain made it all too blurry again. In that moment, all logic left me, and I believed. Yes, I believed. As surely as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, I am not ashamed to say that for a minute there, I was paralyzed by fear, and I felt a cold bead of sweat roll down my back. At the time I felt I should have been angry. Maybe I still do feel that way, but all I could think about was my daughter, and I knew that if I didn't think of something fast, I was never going to see her again. If I left, I'd get in the parking lot, beat my head into the pavement until there was nothing left, or worse, he'd follow me home and get to me while I slept. I couldn't risk Sarah like that, but if I stayed, I knew sure enough that he'd find a way to in there, whatever it took, even if it meant burning the building to the ground. I stood there like a deer in headlights before I eventually built enough resolve to turn my head away, looked at my desk, and saw the pile of evidence with the red notebook that had started all of this on top. I remembered how torn apart the jumper's apartment was and how comparatively orderly the scene that Whiskey's death was. His eyes were still on me. I could feel them. I remember the jumper's description of him tearing into the pages in the book like a jackal tearing into flesh. In that moment, I made a decision that probably saved my life, and it has racked me with guilt ever since. I grabbed the notebook, ripped out the pages the jumper had written, and prayed as I put the first page into the shredder on my desk. I watched him as I did it. He watched me as I did it. I cried. I begged Whiskey for forgiveness. He just looked stone-faced right through my window, right up until the last page went in. Then, as though a switch had been flipped, I felt his gaze lift from me. I saw him turn his head and watched as he stumbled aimlessly out of view. The rest is basically history. The next day I told Chief I'd brought the notebook home with me and my dog had eaten some of the pages. That got me reprimanded, though not fired, since I mentioned I had made a digital scan of the notebook and a transcript of its contents. I didn't find it necessary to tell him that I had deleted them from my computer. And that, as far as I was aware, the only other copies of them were on Whiskey's missing hard drive. They never asked for them, though, and eventually they let up on the suspension. The jumper got filled as a suicide. Whiskey's case went cold. I still visit her grave. I just stand there, reading her name over and over again. I read it until I can close my eyes and remember it. I feel like I want to regret it. I want to regret what I did more than I do. I feel like I should like it more. I feel like I should. Like it would be more decent to hate myself for it. But every time I try, I just think about Sarah. I just can't be that angry. I hope Whiskey, whatever she is, understands. Last month, my daughter and I went out to dinner and celebrate my retirement. She's in high school now. My mother and her are looking through colleges. She wants to be a computer engineer, and I've never been more happy to be in her life. I could not be more proud of her. I hope she's proud of me. I hope she never hears the story, and she knows I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know what it is. I guess I should say, frankly, I don't care. I don't care if he's a schizo hobo or an obsessed crackhead over the preserved corpse of a 400-year-old Frenchman with a fucking ghost of Christmas past. Whoever he is, whatever he is, I haven't seen him since that day. And God is indeed merciful. I will never see him again. I don't know if I believe in ghost stories anymore, but I know that I did not too long ago. And I know that I never want to have to believe them again. Does that answer all of your questions? It's almost 2 in the morning. That was a great read. It took me about 4 or 5 to read. It's going to take even longer to edit. But hey, it was a great story. Thank you, Toxic Cargo, for letting me read it. I recommend breaking your paragraphs down to like sentences. Just just split it up because it just makes it harder for dyslexic people to read. Other than that, it's great. It's fine. Super descriptive, super detailed, very gory, very cool. Loved all of it. All right. All the descriptions are all the links are in the description below. I am getting dizzy and tired. I'm going to go to bed. So, thank you all for watching, and you all have a great night. All right, later.